kulun chuya di simje tangji 이체도 남들이 saying that is.
So just to remind ourselves of the motivation prior to listening to the teachings, and the motivation that says that I'm listening to the teachings in order to gain the state of enlightenment for all other sentient beings.
다디 단다디 기부 주는 그 레디 아니 기부 주는 그 장도 존재네 아니 장도 존재 제가라고 가르쳐래 생기기 좀 맞추려고 생각을 스피드 상가 먼저 견데 담보 생기 숨거리 담보 생기 숨거리 기부 존재기 남라 변에 장도 존재래야 로발라 생기 좀 존재기 생기가 시에체도 더 생기 숨거리.
So even though right now we are within the context of person of small scope, but nonetheless it's very important to assume a motivation that is characterized by bodhicitta, because these paths are actually referred to as path that is common to the part of the greater scope. And so that's why in the ornament of clear realizations, what we find is that bodhicitta, senge, is taught first. And the reason for that is that at all levels, with respect to every practice, including the practice of refuge, that we should be influenced by bodhicitta.
산이다 지저와 레레레 봐. 다 점도 세야지 아랑 부중기 아마라 들어왔지만 시고스 부중심이 부중지 되게 그래서 가른데 가르테니 아마 딩기야 봐. 간에 지테니 아마 딩기 또 제치 사드네 아마 딩기 아니 아마 세야기 매만 저다 어디 미션돼야 말아 어디는 신지 잠도 생겼다 부중긴 아니 마틴 반나신 들어가자는 신지 그렇지 뒤쪽은 아니 양서 숨기 내가 써야 내 손에 도트 내가 내 손숨 듣기지 버시를 지켜서는 버시 그것은 양서 숨생이지 양의 양서 숨 아니 집에 다시 많이 됐다 보시야 어떻게 이제 어떻게 수행도 전다 이 장도 되는 이 장도 되는 내 손에 도트 그래서 많이 아니 그래서 부중기 맞게 변하시죠 그렇지.
집에 다시 따르.
집에 다시 좋아시 로베 도치 다시
망개겠다.
됐다. 양은 수순.
So the measure of having cultivated refuge within oneself, the measure of having developed such a depth of refuge within oneself is likened to the kind of reliance and confidence a child has towards his or her mother. Something that becomes really intuitive, that when at every occasion, whether the child is hungry or whether the child is have some sort of emotional suffering, the only thing that the child actually can recall is his or her mother. So, to such an extent that even when children cry, they cry by uttering the name, of the mother, like, uttering mother, and that's how they cry. So therefore, at that level, the reliance and the confidence that the child places on the mother becomes something total and something intuitive. And so that's the kind of reliance and confidence that we should cultivate towards the three jewels. And when we were able to do that, then it is said that we have developed within ourselves genuine, authentic refuge within oneself. So when that happens, when the reliance and the confidence in the three jewels becomes something so natural, something so intuitive, then it is said that we will be protected from moments of intense terror that we actually go through in the intermediate or Bhadra state. In the intermediate Bhadra state, we talk about different types of terrifying experiences, like the vision of falling through three different cliffs and hearing four terrifying sounds because of the way in which the elements within our body, the four elements, they go through a reverse process. And during the reverse process, the person actually experiences the hearing of four terrifying sounds and so forth. So it is said that when we have this total reliance and confidence and intuitive confidence in the three jewels, at these occasions we will naturally recall the three jewels, and that's how we will be protected from such fears.
Somebody 가르치고래. 저 타무질레 마시나 저 체매봐요. 동네 미가와 타무질레 마시네. 네. 이제 동네 체매봐 친구 취티시나. 아니 그래서는 저 충순진의 베베풀이야. 미가와 충순의 순진의 베베풀이야 팅크리스. 에피제를 주상나 야부상나.
So, within the context of karma and causation that we discussed, one of the nature of karma, one of the characteristics of karma was, as we discussed yesterday, the multiplication effect of karma. That karma multiplies it unchecked by its counteractive forces. So if we know that even a very minor positive karma has that potential to multiply, giving rise to very great resultant impact. And if we also know that even a minor negative karma has potential to multiply, giving rise to extensive impact. If we know this nature, then what this will help us to basically refrain from even minor negative actions. This will help us to even engage in even seemingly minor positive actions.
아드네 레체바 취메서 제부테도 니 예버티스 대야스 신다 삼바다 모보다 대이지권에 도치와 숨바가 이치기 때문에스 다 대야스의 레디야 소바티치는 신다 신기권에 도치와 상대권에 도치와 모부권에 도치와 대이지권에 도치와 전에 뒤지권에 도치와 근데 다디에서 소군하다 뒤지권에 도치와 아니 대이지권에 도치와 순가 이지기 때문에 디체다 신규권에 도치와 세디 신배나 수수주 타마바로 된데 마부지를 펜바제네 펜바제바다 네바체발레 전주 선바르지레 네 펜이제바디 아니 도처이 디신 신국군에 도처스 아니 디네 가르치고 신국군에 도처스 아니 300권에 도처다 신세야 돼 임바 신기 수나 사베 신다 지금 베나 파말라 신다를 펜이제발레 파말라 펜이제바디야 도처이 그래서 펜도 신도 파마티 펜도 신이 전주 선바디다 인데기 신다 펜도 신 심제 탐지 저와주바다 동네스 세지 가르수들이 신비게 상바다도 공 중에 치르바디에서 이제 네 파마티 펜도 신 켜라지에서 신국군의 파말라 펜바제네 도치와 네바제네 도치와 또 신국군이죠. 아니 상계를 줘바제는 네 신국군의 도치. 장샘라 줘바제발레 아니 상계를 줘바제제바이나 야 도치와 경주도 도치와 다디 인데기 네 도치로가 어때다 도치와 세디 아니 디지 야 never 냠 타발지 펜도제는 야 도치와 파마다 never 냠 타바다 터리니 정도 시제 숨쉬어야 또수 대들을 펜도제는 펜도 도치와 이제 어때지 또수 신국군의 도치와지
And also, with respect to karma, we have to understand that the same karmic action can be more intense or powerful depending on there being difference in the nature of, first of all, the object of action or the field of action or the object of one's action. And then also there being difference in one's intention or samba and so forth. So first of all, because of there being difference in the nature of object or the nature of the field of action, and this basically refers to, first of all, the fact that it is more beneficial and more powerful to engage in wholesome actions towards those who are arhat, those who are aryas, than towards those who are ordinary beings. And this difference is because of the difference in spiritual qualities or visions. And then the second is that the same action, when done towards one's own parents, or when done towards people who are extremely sick and needy, or when done towards travelers who have traveled from faraway places, helping them and so forth, they are actually seen as also more powerful because of there being difference in the way in which the action can benefit or impact the recipient. So these differences are because of there being difference in the nature of the object of action or the field of action.
되네 300권에 또 제와서야 되나지 소주기 레를 제베네 소주기 레디 시당 잡고네 나네 소주기 레 제바다 양지 근데 그걸로 잡고 시다 매버지는 소주기 레를 제베네 이리야 또 지준티 시당 잡고네 또 아니 소주 제베디 300권에 또 제바 시세야 되지 버리데 300권에 또 300 잡고 지켜버려 아니 기타 아니 심지어 다른 지역도 산지도 그만 토가 자원량 토가니 전주지를 세컨 직점 지니야 전주라 세지 컴가럽 지니야 이 그래서는 치도 저와 심제 탐제 심제를 타야 말아. 아니 장중을 매번 장중 뒤에 되게 참여 인제 참여 봐. 저사 뒤니 거네. 네 심제를 좀 상기 좀 그만 통도 좀 뒤치도 세진수는 아니 인제 그래서 이제 소는 받으면 사야 되지. 300건에
Then the second basis of differentiation that makes a difference in the power or impact or the intensity of the karma is there being difference in the quality or nature of one's own intention. So, if, for example, one kills an animal, for example, or somebody with intense hatred, that karma would be much more intense or powerful than if we killed somebody without much hatred or without much kind of intention. So, likewise, the same act of giving some food to an animal or to an individual, depending on the intention, can have a big difference in terms of its impact. So, if the food is given without much intention, then it becomes a simple virtuous action. But if even even simple food given to an animal, when you dedicate that towards the enlightenment of all sentient beings, so that you dedicate that by virtue of giving this particular food, that may I actually achieve the state of enlightenment, so that I can then lead all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment. If then, because of the power of this motivation, then the virtue becomes also infinite, because the sentient beings are infinite. We dedicated it towards all sentient beings, and also we dedicate it so that when all sentient beings gain the state of enlightenment, and the enlightened qualities are also infinite. So because of the power of the intention, also the degree or the impact of the karma also differs, even though the act is the same act.
뭐거나 또 좋았다. 상승기 짐바, 상시표할래. 상승기 짐바래. 니 취기 짐바. 또 좋아. 뭐 상승기가 상승 짐바 당하는데 취기 짐바 당하는데 또 좋아. 다디 뒤쯤에다 뭐거나 또 좋아. 이거부터 뭐부터
So then the third basis of differentiation is the difference in the nature of substance or object that is given or dedicated to the other sentient beings. So that basically means that it is more karmically powerful and beneficial to give teachings as opposed to giving material goods. So therefore, also the nature of this substance makes the difference in terms of whether the karma becomes more powerful or less powerful.
That's then you got to tell the so give Ranga what cheba chebale. Nijanju Simba Jigi cheba chebati, that do chebati. Simbagi Nirajungi chebachena, do chebachena, Karakanji, Gave Chochena, Gave Zawachena, do cheba. That then to look. 아니 개미가 어찌 미기와 전에야 김배 미기와 제발에서 준비 미기와 제발이 다 대가 쳐야래 김배 개와 제발에 준비 개와 제발이야 또 쳐야 또 어떻게 땡기고 또 치세요.
So then the next basis of differentiation is the difference in the physical medium, or ten in Tibetan, physical medium. So that, but this basically means that if the medium or vehicle is that of a lay person, then the positive or negative action that is committed by that lay person would be less powerful than that would be that is actually committed by a fully ordained monk. Likewise, the same action committed by a bodhisattva an action, the same action committed by an ordinary person, there would be difference in terms of, again, intensity of the karmic result. So in both cases, uh, whether it is negative or positive, it's going to be more powerful when the physical medium is higher. And so therefore, with respect to bodhisattvas, it will be higher. With respect to fully ordained monks, it will be higher. And that applies to both negative and positive actions. So that's the third basis of differentiation, and that is the basis of the big difference in the basis or the medium of the physical medium.
상계 온주 제부 장샤기 참 상계 온주 제부 신도 개배바도 주든 송알에 메지지 등기 강대라니 주든 나지 숨버디 편이지 뒤죽거네세 뒤죽거네 아니 덤베 덤바라 겸마 슈베 뒤수 주든 유린 송알에 덤바 집에 니베 뒤수 마투 잠시도 주든 송나 뒤 편이지
So, so then also the power of the karma differs because of there being difference in time frame. So the next basis of differentiation is time, and this basis of differentiation, that is time, is actually not explicitly mentioned in the path of bliss, but it is actually implicitly referred to by actually including in the so forth category. And so that basically means that that if one were to observe morality during the time of this particular religious king called Wangzhou Gebo, who is actually in a different dimension of the world, in the northeast of the planet Earth, when that particular king came. So it is said that if someone were to observe morality during that time, and someone were to observe morality now in this degenerate time, then the morality so observed during the degenerate time would be much more powerful because of time. And likewise, it is said that even during Shakyamuni Buddha's own spiritual era, the moral ethical discipline that one observed during the golden period of the Buddha's time, that is in the earlier days of the Buddha's teachings, that would be less powerful than observing morality even for a very short period of time in the morning, during the time when there is the danger of actually losing or degenerating the teachings altogether, what we call as the current time. So during the current time, even if we observe morality for a short period of time, it is said that that is much more powerful and effective than observing morality during the Buddha's own time.
That indeed, to soon to get that, Sambala Tenica. Nyamu Beto Cheva, Beto Chevas. Tata Beja, Nyambo Tochons, oh, Shingita, Mobutan, thank you, Connect, Tocheva, Sumbala, Ijiki Tebakene, Tajas Undu Lende, Shesuma, Len Machebata Mite, Len Yeti, Len Yevaris, Le Pechori, Le Machebat Chegmari, Chevachu Maris, in a le Shingi Connect Tocheva, Sambe Connect Tocheva, Mobile, thank you for the Tocheva, Sumba Insa, Chora, Sumba, La Ijiki Tebakene, Undu Shebatis. Leganam Shashabatali Yiji Devagene, Gyajula Sobe, Gyatamone Trujin, Migawa Jula Sobe, Migawa Tamone, La Magubes, 참모 내장 고수는 막게 랑도 레버자오 대다 진을 거나 말이 진지를 수스제다 뒤진게 자체 라메지 위에 차례 되는 걸 세대제를 이거 오늘 시스템제 탐지기 뉴스를 쇼베 대다디 계제장 니 대다디 또바 개발진 계수 선다디지 가르수베데 레긴 남샤 수신도 삼바 라 계지에 또바 아니 레긴 남샤를 소버다 수신도 삼베 또바 개발진 계수 삼바치 어다디지.
So then, after understanding these points about karma and karmic actions, and understanding the 4 features of karma that we discussed yesterday, including how karma is certain or certainty of karma, and the multiplication impact of karma, or nature of karma, and how when one does not come across a result for which one has not actually committed an action, and then how karma is infallible and indestructible. So these understanding all of these things, and then also understanding these different natures of how karma can be much more powerful or effective because of there being many different bases of differentiation that I just discussed just then. Because there being difference in the object of merit or object of field of action, because of there being difference in one's own intention, because of there being difference in the substance that one used or uses to engage in wholesome actions, because of there being difference in the physical medium or the basis, and also because of there being difference in the time frame. By cultivating conviction in these aspects of karma, conviction based on faith, conviction based on the faith that is actually taught by the Buddha himself. So by cultivating these convictions based on faith, then one should make supplication to the Guru Deity that one has visualized on top of one's crown, and then in response to one's supplication, then you visualize the descending of the nectar from the Guru Deity through your crown, filling your entire body, and also visualizing that that nectar descending through the crown in all sentient beings, filling their entire body, so that their bodies have transformed into the nature of bright, clear and radiant nature. And because of that, you cultivate this strong conviction that all your and others' good qualities, such as lifespan and merit, are increased and expanded. And it's particularly then you visualize that all the hindrances that one hinders oneself and others from actualizing the special realization, understanding the law of causality, are eliminated. And based on that, then you cultivate a strong conviction that one gains the special, unique realization which enables one to practice observance of karma in the sense of discarding negative actions and adopting wholesome, positive actions.
대다른 배경스 님부터 좀 대다대 간섭지도기 뭐 아니 그래서 예배 충분히 예배 관야다 예배 충분히 예배도야 이제 재장 님부터 좀네 너무 또 저에 자란 밑에 그나 스타 기타 님부터 좀 너무 또 쳐야 있어요 가디 이제 배는야 잘했지 이게 그래서나 아니 도시 샤담 샤담은 배버죠 아니 이 그거에다가 마셔야지 도시 샤담 배고리스.
So then it says in the text that even though I make such effort by understanding the different natures and attributes of karma, by making an effort to refrain from even engaging in the smallest of negative actions, by training to engage in even the smallest of wholesome actions. Even though I tried my best in doing this, because of the fact that the strength of negative emotions are great and the strength of one's own antidote are small or weak, when one is therefore infected by negative actions or unwholesome actions, then at those times one should engage in the practice of making purification or compassion by using the four powers of purification.
다들 오늘 근데 님부터 돕시도 근데 저거를 쓰는 님부 돕시다. 지다 님부 돌레 가르송이를 쓰는 님부 군도 집에도 제가 숭당스 숭아 디 마네다 숭아지 참야디 숭아지 응이 공부 체주바 상계의 체주바 구상바 찾아신바 최바 도지 선배 공대를 대바스제 어디지 너무 순야리스
So then, what should we do in terms of remedial actions if one has committed or one is infected by non-virtuous actions because one has committed those actions? Then in the Sutra of Antidote, Nimbudo, it is mentioned that in terms of remedial actions, one should, there are so many things that one can do, including recitation of mantra, including meditations on emptiness, and then reciting the names of Tathagatas or Buddhas, commissioning statues of Buddhas, making extensive offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, engaging in Vajrasattva purification practices, and so forth.
다들 내나르잖아 도시 나네 도시 참 주버때 상계 숨주 생활이 동샤리를 되는데 동샤티나라 상계의 제 숨주 송어야 상계 숨주 송어 제 레디 주인지 제 아니 수술이 그래서 그래 팽이디 그래서 그래 자와시 아니 걸 참이나도 딘디기 디바다야 상계 수술이 제주야리에서 상계 숨주송의 제주는 아니 샤군지는 또 지그리 순두가 들라 아데 또 지sembe 공대대 조침 네 상계 숨주송을 동샤 상계 제주에서야 돼 상계 숨주송을 제주야 돼 아니 동샤 어디 동샤 동비는 또 지금 야리스 누가 어디 대남 신지
So in the commentary to the Path to Bliss, it is specifically mentioned that in terms of remedial actions, that if one can engage in the confessional practice of the 35 Buddhas, it is especially effective because you recite the names of 35 Buddhas and pray to the 35 Buddhas of confession, and each of the Buddhas have their own unique qualities in purifying different types of actions, including the actions committed out of the four roots or four root negative emotions, including the five heinous or five uninterrupted negative actions like killing one's parents and so forth. So it is said that when we do engage in remedial action by engaging in the confessional prayer of the 35 Buddhas, it is especially more effective. And also, of course, Vajrasattva practice is also very effective as well.
다티 디기부 중국 중국 사례스다. 기부 중국이 아니 로즈만 많이 받을 건데 개베 체디 로는 줄디 지달 삼자 지달 삼자 치마도 인일레 미지와 내게는 중국도 밖에 체스 계산 체디 로는 줄디 체디 돈중이게 로는 파주니 지대 치마도 인이기 로 아니 전gel레 미지나 아니 중국도 밖에 인스 다들 디랑 진도가 야 가시나라 신들이 치마 개쳐라 이거 개수나 아니 이거 중국도 밖에 인스 신들이 치마 개쳐 지대에 추게 쳐버렸지 어디 나단데디 신들로는 줄디 지들 삼자 치마 등이 길로를 미지가 피 이거 중국 또 밖에
So with these we finish the cycle of teachings belonging to the portion of small scope or small capacity, and in the end, there's a discussion of what is the measure of having achieved the realizations of a person of small scope. So in this particular text, that state of realization or that level of realization is actually defined as a state when one does not entertain any thought of attachment and happiness in this lifetime, but all one's thinking and concern pertains to happiness and well-being in next lifetimes. So this is how it is defined here. In other texts, it is said that one has achieved the realization pertaining to the person of small scope when compared to the happiness and well-being of this life, one gives more focus or more importance to the well-being and happiness in future lifetimes, which basically is to say that between mundane concerns of this lifetime, one gives more importance to one's own kind of well-being in the future lifetimes. So that is when one has actually achieved the realizations of the person of small scope.
제가 기부 중추 세티 다르마 세티 기부 중추 다르마 세티 짐벌지 아니 짐바 뼈벌지니 기부 중추 뒤에 손에 짐벌지 내 손에 뼈벌지게 제가 다 기부 중추 내 최고 것이 되네 주변 제가 기부 중추 뒤 천디기 아니 지금 가르치면은 친디기 좀 가르치면은 추스면 좋지 가르치는 추스에 다르마시아 짐벌지 그 진야디 진야디 추기 진야디 가르치면 손에 짐바다 그에 동일은 짐바다 시시 탐절인 짐바스 아니 내 손이 야 기부 충분히 추디 내 손에 짐바지 내 손에 껴버지 기부 링기 추디 그에 동일이 껴버지 기부 침부 추디 시시 기부 탐절이 껴버지게 내 추세 생기열이 천디기 돈도 가르치는 데 추수면 되었다 어때리스
So I mentioned yesterday that when one achieves the realization of the person of small scope, then that is when one begins to engage in the practice of Dharma. So otherwise, prior to that, if we engage in wholesome actions with purpose of having or experiencing some sort of well-being and happiness in this lifetime, then those actions technically do not become a dharmic action. They do not become a dharmic practice, and so that's why once one has achieved the realization of the person of small scope, then that is the beginning of engaging in Dharma practice. So Dharma, and that is because in Sanskrit, Dharma has the connotation of holding and protecting. And so the three levels of teachings, the teachings belonging to the person of small scope, middle scope, and great scope, they give rise to unique set of protection or holding from falling into kind of different corresponding sufferings. So, for example, when one engages in the Dharma or person of small scope, then those dharmic practices protect one from the lower realms. So that's why it becomes a Dharma practice, because Dharma, having the sense of protection, these Dharma practices belonging to the person of small scope protects one from the sufferings of lower realms. And then the next level, all the circle of teachings belonging to the person of middle scope, they also become Dharmic practice, because these Dharmic practices of person belonging to the middle scope protects oneself from the sufferings of samsara altogether. All kind of forms of suffering within conditioned existence, not just sufferings of lower realms. And finally, all the circle of teachings belonging to the person of great scope also becomes Dharmic practices, because these circle of teachings belonging to the person of great scope protects one from sufferings of both samsara and nirvanic peace. So therefore, that's why we say that technically Dharma has to have these kind of connotations.
That is. And that give a chimney Ramsay the Lamching of a Mari, give a chimney Ramsay, and the Lam give a jingle Lamkison and it in a Lamching of a Sambas in Dene, Solam Solam sent in the name of give a chimney Ram the Lamching of a Mari in a Karasude.
Although when we talk about entering the path and then traversing the 5 paths leading to the state of enlightenment, starting from the path of accumulation and so forth, at this stage of the person of small scope, one has not actually entered the authentic path as yet. That the path of the person of small scope is not an authentic path as such, because for one to enter into the path authentically, one has to give rise to complete renunciation from all forms of existence within samsara, and that happens during the path of the person of middle scope, when one generates genuine renunciation from samsara altogether, which then corresponds to the first path, the path of accumulation.
Niba Kibu Jinda Chumuwe Lamji Rebala Lochambala Ni Stat Denamna.
So now in the path to bliss, we read from the text. That is basically the circle of teachings belonging to the person of middle scope, where it's developing a desire for liberation. In the text, it says, the mind training in the stages of the path, which is shared with the being of immediate capacity, which is middle scope, is of 2.
Tatela need to caress in Tabatu need to look at Tabaratu and Generation need this.
So these 2 are developing a desire for liberation, and then the second is the explanation of the actual path that leads to liberation.
That happened to need to look at the letter subject needy, changing all the Chita Javas, Chungum Chita Javas, that the Nietzsche, changing all Sita, Lamla, Minam Jang, negative twins here. Minam Jang, Juju Padre, Chungum here. Minam nam jambe tuji dane dine se dong no chuya da dine chi
So then the first part, developing a desire for liberation, in turn has two sections. The first is what to do during the actual meditative session and what to do during in-between sessions. So actual session really refers to the session when one engages in focused meditation pertaining to the respective path. And in-between session refers to the time, when one stops from that engaged meditation and engages in other routine daily activities like eating and so forth. So the actual session again is divided into three sections. The first is the preparatory practice or the preparation. The second is the actual practice, and then the last is the concluding practice.
Jamne kundu lamal habetha to chichang suwandi sheba yinche ngara dang sheba yinche sluga sheba yinche ani ngara shinchas dati sheba yinche ngara shinchas ngara siyadi dati shubu dina nazuga shubu sungi nazuga 당진바 수소 팀비 jamne kundu menes다 yala 좀바 메데다 좀 피디스루가 네 소안데바 맹아신 유단 티니스 자우 데네 라마 투베 온두 세트 타고도 슈베 시루란 저 던데가 대남 기위제 기위네 투베 온두라 투베 온두야 랑게 지 라마라 팀 디미 모스부발에 지 신디펜더 인메이팅 부르 대라 뭐 디지털 나마 임발라 넘버 저셔져 투고 시바네 도지기도 무시고 파스 자다 미네 다 멘데 도티다제 도티 피르게 제수다 다 단데디 조신 시에데 조신 게야디제 단 디레샤 멘데 도티다 야나 좀 멘데다 제번 도티 피제스 란다랑기 타고 남네베 마신제 탐지기 진지 수와다브라 삼라 구시다닌 알라말라벨라 통화도 지잖아 수와디 집제 주고 다니엘라말라벨라 통화도 지잖아 수와 이제 주고 다니엘라말라벨라 통화도 지잖아 수와 나도 주고 다니엘라 통화도 지잖아 라마 근데 라말라벨라 통화도 지잖아 수와데 이단 근데 라말라벨라 통화도 지잖아 수와 산제 근데 kintiru indola malabala, kandu kuntiru chögyo kundu namalabala, tuandu jechala suwantiru jamne kundu namalabala, tuandu jechala suwantiru wada jamne kundu namalabala, tuandu jechala suwantiru yinche sesunga yinche diti yinpa dada masimje tamje kuwa tunamebane yuyiringla shudabas dati dante diti
이게 뭐지? 속신도 세다고 그래.
다 소신도 세대도 있지.
저도 이거.
야르바. 예버지. mental to Kasa, Yana to the teacher. Yana to the teacher. Kasa, Kasa. Jawa Sejanum the Kujat, Tomen and City to Tanji, if I do. Amado donation and let you that this in it together. Candela Ginala and the Yanatumbayari. What did the name together? That can do Yana to teach chess. Anyhow, didn't much on the mention in the Karina. To teach chess. Any so at the teacher. Just when the Lama travel to the channel so at this. That is. Do teacher in a Capsum to Lama Lab in the port to Jitan so at this left sooner, can get Jitarva. The Yanchi chess. That Capsum to Lama Lab in the port to Jitan so at this jet. So shoot up that. I need that Masim Jetan just that.
So then, if you look at the text, it says, with regard to the preparatory practice, it says preparation, preparation, 385, verse number 385. It says, the preparation is the same as in the previous session, all the way down to the supplication. And then it gives a line from that supplication. I pray to you, composite of the objects of refuge, my Lama, special deity, subduer, King Vajratara. So when it says the preparation is same as in the previous session, that refers back to page number 3 in the Tibetan text, and in the English it's all the way where it says in the beginning, page number, look at page number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually in the 5. So what it says is basically there is the preparation practice, the visualization that we have to do is mentioned there. So we have to basically apply the same method here. So what is actually meant here is that we visualize the merit field, and the merit field is already there. So then through these objects of refuge in the merit field, we start by offering a very short mandala, the 7 limbed practices and a short mandala. So the 7 limbed practices in the short mandala can be used one that is in the Gandhan Hajama, the 100 deities of the land of joy, or any kind of mandala offering, and the 7 limbed practices is sufficient. So after offering a short 7 limbed prayer and a short mandala, then what you have to visualize is that you have to visualize in the center of the merit field there is Shakyamuni Buddha. So you visualize that light rays, golden light rays, emanate forth from Shakyamuni Buddha's body, emanating in all the 7 directions, and then these rays hook back. These rays strike the other objects of refuge in the merit field. They dissolve into light. All of them then dissolve back into Shakyamuni Buddha, and then in the merit field there is only Shakyamuni Buddha. But on top of your crown, you have visualized your own root guru earlier, and so then you visualize that Shakyamuni Buddha in turn dissolves into your root guru, and by virtue of that, now your guru transforms into a nature where the guru and the deity are inseparable. So that now you visualize that in appearance, now on top of your crown you visualize the appearance of Shakyamuni Buddha, but in essence you actually visualize that as your own teacher. So your own teacher appearing in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha, symbolizing the embodiment for all the objects of refuge. So this is what is actually mentioned earlier, and so we have to kind of bring that practice again here. That is what is meant by here when it says the preparation is same as the previous session. And after that, then you do the supplication. And the supplication is, the detailed supplication is actually on page number 5 in the English text, where it begins by saying, uh, the, uh, they offer a condensed version of the 7 branches of worship along with mandala, and then think that you are praying and unison with all the sentient beings, your mothers who surround you. Then you begin with the supplication prayer here. It's, I pray to you, essence of the 4 bodies, my Lama, special deity, subdue King Vajradhara. I pray to you, the essence of the truth body, which is free of obstructions, my special Lama deity, subdue King Vajradhara, and so forth, culminating in the last like 2 lines, which is actually given here. I pray to you, composite of the objects of refuge, my Lama, special deity, subdue King Vajradhara. So, if you're not able to go through all the supplication prayers, it is sufficient to just recite these 2 lines. When you recite these 2 lines, everything that is actually contained here, because it says, I pray to you, composite of objects of refuge. So it's the embodiment of all the refuge, which is basically your root guru manifesting in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha, appearing in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha on top of the crown. And after doing this application, then it says, then we start here, the all sentient beings, my mothers, and I have been born in circular existence, and so forth. So then you make this fervent prayer after supplication to the gurus, as it is actually mentioned in the text here. All sentient beings, my mothers, and I have been born in circular existence, and then have experienced a variety of intense sufferings for a long time. This is due to not having generated in our mental continuums a strong mind that understands that all circular existence has a nature of suffering and desires liberation from that. Therefore, Lama deity, please bless all sentient beings, my mothers, and me, now to produce a strong mind that understands that all circular existence has a nature of suffering and desires liberation from that. So then in response to this prayer, fervent prayer, then you visualize descending of nectar from the Guru deity, from top of your crown, filling your entire body and the body of all sentient beings. And by virtue of that, then you cultivate the conviction, as it is mentioned here, that all negative actions and obscurations accumulated from the beginning of this lifetime are purified, and in particular, they purify the negative actions and obscurations, sickness and possessions, which prevent the development of a strong mind that understands all existence has a nature of suffering and desires liberation from that. And so then you visualize that your body and the body of all sentient beings transform into a nature that is radiant, clear, and pristine, clear and radiant. And as a result of that, you think that they are produced in you this exceptional realization that understands that all cyclic existence has a nature of suffering, and then desires liberation from that.
That in a quality tangible jola, and that quasi the happy just Madame Coenetria, to sit in a man like net Zambolin said, Sumigness, Sugams, Sumi, the way comes. What to do? That netting, but a coenet. That corrosiati coas cole to la quangosum gubiera, just of course, the quasi at the caressene, laying it only. Ani kasar ani tungai je phumbu jinga jingbatela kwale dressing ata kasar ani lengi je ongi ani tungai je phumbu jingbatela dressing that tarba to se dre chatile tarba se kwase no what it is around the net, the come to net.
So then, when it comes to generating the desire to gain liberation from samsara or cyclic existence, first of all, we have to identify what samsara is or what cyclic existence is. So generally speaking, when we talk about samsara or cyclic existence, we tend to actually pinpoint it to the physical realm by saying that this earth is samsara, or the desire realm is samsara, or the hell realm is samsara. But these are actually the places for the encircling being to take rebirth. So in terms of the realm of places, then the realms are divided into like desire realm, form realm, and formless realm, or animal realm, hell realm, and so forth. But actual samsara refers to the individual person who actually is bound in his or her body and mind because of klesha, because of negative emotions and karmic actions propelled by those negative emotions, so that that person is bound in suffering in his body and in his mind. So that is the actual samsara. Samsara really refers to the individual person that is bound by negative emotions and karma in an aggregate of physical and mental aggregate. And to gain liberation means to gain liberation from this bondage of klesha, from this bondage of negative emotions and karma, and then from the aggregate of suffering. So that state of gaining freedom from bondage of karma and klesha is actually referred to as liberation itself.
That is Koa said that Koa said Taba said Taba to be Taba to be jiggy, but Namdele Tamigi Nami Punguti churches. Then do a main test. Gigi, really like Gigi, Yambuton the villages. That you said it, so turn to the Titanzire. Tamigi Nami Punguset, and Nami Punguset to make him material. They tend to take it best in it, they tend to take marriage. Then do a marriage. Carrera curricula, Gigi Nimbutum de Yaris. And he to the caress and attending Maria telling Nimbutum de Tami to be Shiro Yaris. He combala Tene, and 남시지라 아니 코드제 제그리스 님부디 도지 고점바지 뒤지야스 다 님부디 저 dob기 타미기 남미기 풍부규 단지 말이거든 좀바디 있잖아 좀바디를 다 달바시는 냥데스 어디라 근데 달바시 저서 답을 주지기를 거든
So, once we have identified what samsara is, then we can infer that liberation is possible. And in Pramana Vardiga, Buddhist valid cognition treatises, it is argued logically that it is possible to achieve liberation because liberation is possible because the cause of samsara, the cause of aggregate of suffering has a counteractive force or an antidote that is powerful enough to destroy it. And because of that, we can infer that liberation is possible. So this is how it is actually argued in Pramana Vardiga through Buddhist logic. So what it meant is that the samsara or suffering here really refers to our own psychophysical aggregate, which is in the nature of suffering, as it is propelled by negative emotions and karma. And the cause of this samsara is ignorance. So therefore, in Pramana Vardiga it says, ignorance, which is the cause of samsara, has a counteractive force that can destroy it. And that counteractive force is the wisdom that realizes selflessness, the wisdom that realizes emptiness. And so because of that, because there is wisdom there that realizes emptiness or selflessness, we can infer that nirvana is possible. So therefore, when with the wisdom realizing emptiness or selflessness, if one destroys the cause of samsara, which is ignorance, then that is liberation itself. So liberation or moksha or nirvana, they mean the same thing, and that simply refers to the destruction of the root cause of samsara, which is ignorance, through the power or through the logic or through the wisdom of emptiness.
되네. 디 다음에 또 베시르 단지기 다 로트버리스 인상 네 코메템 버리 그래서 로트버 디 이나 아니 그 냠부터 좀 버티시기 페나 좀 데기 라라야 메메 판침도 로또 체르바 로또디 다 인데는 메피 이번쯤에 로디 또 고가드에 인데게 라는 메 매번쯤에 로디 아니 다다 페나 또 하는 데는 메야 또 해야 됐으나 아니 다른 무슨기 내가 죽게 여러분 메토인도 인데게 라는 메토인도 좀 아니 매번쯤에 로디 가드로 메템버리 티카스 그 내주도 tumba진 집어 매번 인상 내주도 tumba진 로디 게임도 내주도 메tumbe 로디 진도 로디 고르바 어디 인상 tundelala 매번 진도 존도신 메템버 인베 쳤어
So in the Pramana Vardiga, another the part of the reason to prove that liberation or moksha is possible is it mentioned then that as an example it mentioned that it is like understanding that there is fire in the distant mountain where there is smoke. So that basically means that if some perception or mental position is a wrong perception, then that wrong perception, can be eliminated through inference and through direct perception. So self-grasping is like that. Self-grasping is something that is a wrongly perceived mental state. If it does exist, if self-grasping really does exist, then we cannot destroy it because it accords with reality. Because it does not accord with reality, because it is a misconception, then we can destroy it through inference first and then ultimately through direct perception. So therefore the part of the example that is used here, where it says, self-grasping can be destroyed, which is the root of samsara, can be destroyed because it is a wrong perception, very much like the wrong perception that thinks that there is no fire in the distant mountain where there is smoke, can be destroyed as well because it does not accord with reality. The reality is that whenever there is smoke, there is bound to be fire. And so, first of all, that mind that says, that thinks that in the distant mountain where there is smoke, there is no fire, because it is wrongly perceived, it can be destroyed by the mind that understands or that thinks that in a distant mountain where there is smoke, there is fire. First of all, through inference and logic, and logically, smoke is product of fire. So if there is smoke, there's bound to be fire. So that is logical inference. Then ultimately, through direct cognition, when one goes there to where this smoke is, then we will directly perceive, without relying on reasoning, that there is actually, in fact, there is fire. So once when there is a direct perception that there is fire where there was smoke earlier, then that destroys the original misconception that maintained that where there is smoke there is no fire. So very much like that in Brahmavartika, ignorance is self-grasping is likened to that. It is a misconceived reality. It is something that does not accord with reality. So therefore it can be destroyed. When that can be destroyed, then that is the root cause of samsara. So therefore samsara can be destroyed, which means there is liberation.
That happened to Jason, Tarpache, Coache, Chatted Tarbas here, that Tarbas, Jason, Coach, Coa Tata to make a range to Shane, Dele Tandulo, shoot at yours. That teacher. That never, Munishila, means that is so at the Joativa. Never mention any quality to me samba. So should to me sambas. That quality to me samba tilla. Jirama have commission the money to do something. Dog may be chewing with shooting la tuition to labe. And do to me tata the top jams. That give a chung with person. Give a chung of make a chung with children. That give a chung of your among a date to make a chung with children, give a chung of the lamb in Egypt. Just a doggy make a chung with children, tuition to love a latini, and to make it daily and to go back to dance. Never to Nelly and then to go back to dance. That never let hand it to go back. Then to go back. When I made you, then they did to time you didn't. Meaning, then to go back. What of Jan? The Neta and a Pambe have a sheep matona. There got Katie Jamin to the Penamina Jinshi, Dawa Jine, Servanella, Deep Arturia, and Yerishin Timgit Tibas, Timjutani. yupe nuba so dunge tabu nyuwa la ta nyuwa la na gashi ge ngo chen so ji ta yupe nuba dunge me ja gashi ge ngo chen che ni ani kurang la yupe nuya ge dunge me ba che me ja di nima re re shin sube dunge che che ro 다 니마리리 신다 수배 동에 뒤치지 그렇다고 나지 수배는 해 버려 봐. 내가 친주 다야지 차야 담바리디 그 니마디 뒤세기 있을 때 좀 니마리리 신 수배 동에 지시는 거에 대외 로 중세 장해 보신 대외로 중세 장야 말 봐. 동아 자원에 방배 타가 마톱치 대주 거봐 진짜시 통자 nga jegi le sangbu pemba sene ta nga jegi le sangbu pemba se dendu denla longju ya digi longju ya dese ani nga su sumdi ya ma chungdi yu rin la shu tabi dunga na su shi mo ko dus wata jig ale suwa tabi ya jig di je.
So therefore, in the beginning, when one generates that intention that says that all forms of life within samsara are in nature of suffering, we have to understand, what is samsara and what is liberation and how liberation is possible and so forth. For that prayer to become meaningful and powerful. And so then we come to the actual practice. To the preparatory practice. So the actual practice consists of contemplating on the suffering of samsara in general, and then contemplating on the specific, suffering of some specific sufferings within samsara. So contemplating the first one, contemplating the suffering of samsara, suffering within samsara or cyclic existence in general. So this is how we do. Again, meditating on the Lama Didi seated upon the crown of one's own head, one contemplates like this. As in the text it says 11b, by properly learning the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous deeds, I will attain the high state of happy migration, which is beyond the sufferings of bad transmigrations. However, if I do not obtain a liberation which abandons suffering from its root, I will not even have a moment's occasion of happiness. So therefore now there is a gradual progression here. Earlier, the practitioner is at the level of a person of small scope, where the primary goal or intention is to just gain freedom from lower realms, and the actual practice consists of engaging in the 10 wholesome actions, refraining from negative actions, 10 negative actions. So that is the actual practice of the person of small scope. But now, through training, and so when we say person of small scope, middle scope, it's the same individual oneself that goes through this gradual progression. Now, what one generates here in terms of one's mental attitude is that even if one has engaged in refraining from the 10 non-virtuous actions, and therefore one is able to gain freedom from lower realms, but that is not sufficient until and unless one achieves complete freedom from samsara altogether, from its root, as it is mentioned. If I do not have liberation which abandons suffering from its roots, I will not have even a moment's occasion of happiness. So therefore now one kind of travels or evolves to the person of middle scope, and so just gaining freedom from lower realms because of the practices of the person of small scope is actually likened to here like a criminal who is actually to be executed in one month's time, and so someone who is actually in lower realm is like someone who's going to be executed in 1 month time because of some sort of criminal activity. But meanwhile, that person suffers from legal punishments as like beating with sticks and so forth, or having sealing wax dripped upon oneself and so forth. And but the person who is actually gained freedom from the lower realms is like someone who is actually is uh, freed from these interim punishments, but nonetheless is going to be executed in 1 month's time. So that individual who has gained from these interim punishments, even though he's gained freedom from these interim punishments like beating with sticks and so forth, will not have a moment of joy knowing that him or herself is going to be executed in 1 month's time. So therefore, that's very much like someone who has gained freedom from the lower realms, but has not gained freedom from samsara altogether. So that's what is mentioned here. Once I have not obtained liberation, which abandons suffering from its root, although I might attain a high position of happy transmigration, I'll fall into the 3 bad transmigrations when I've exhausted the previous good action, which propelled me into that happy transmigration. Then I will have to undergo very strong sufferings for a long time. So therefore, the mental attitude that one cultivates here is even when one has gained freedom from lower realms and has gained rebirth in higher realms like that of humans and gods and so forth, when the karma that propelled one into that happy transmigration is exhausted, then there is real potential of actually falling into the lower realms. So therefore, just gaining freedom from the lower realms is not ultimate freedom from samsara altogether.
다 현양 그와들이 내니기 뭔지 여 랑친제 동해기란 식을 만들었어. 다 그와들이 내니기 온거지 랑친제를 동해를 만들어버렸어. 내가 된주 알아도 밀리케네 하리케네 아니 내니기 온 개수는 아니 동해기란 식을 만들어버렸어. 그래서는 장인도 주로와 네 다르죠. 다디 동해 주 삼바세체 어디리 장인의 배 네바메 봤어. 장인도 주로하던 네양 다르죠에 페뉴라 이데메 페뉴라에 이데메도 페발에 이데메도 네바지르에 이데메도 하주주야 이데메 스티체 그에 대와 지금 제가 뭔데 탑니다 마세 그에 대와 그때 전에야 문주단에 내가지 뭔데 탑니다 마세 아니 텔레 마세 그에 대와 차니 차바게 되는 메시바다 그에 대와 차니 아니 지 롱주를 차든지 롱주를 차발을 때니 아니 디체도 롱주 사야 사바디 지니야 사찬에 숨에 두니 숨마도 타마 제베 두니다 제 다른 저기 그래서 그래 농주의 제여도 제니다 요구 주지도 있고요 봐 인산 차바이 예버 제디 동네 메세바 언제바 제스 어디디 뭐바메 바세 네 류상부 지금 투자 야니양도 돌고 류상부 그때 통해 야니양도 돌고 이제 도야지 미쇼 타집에 돌먹고 베제베 류지 텐도 내야지 메브리 류상부 지금 나자 야니양도 돌고 류토바리 이데네 토마메베네 야니양도 년베제 게타 뭐반네 와다 겨게 타티 디네스 얘기를 해야 돼. 타티 체수 주데 내 숨을 들어지. 게타 뭐반네. 그 편도 지금 토자 다른 예발 돌고 편도 토발이 이데네. 그 편도 간지 스톱스네 탈 그 편도 간지 주네 탈 제국이야 봐. 샤는 로고 여러분 네 저게 이데메스 라니지부 조메바 지데 파르도 나 조메베니 바세야 라니지부 치에체 라니지부 베네케베체 라니지부 게브라 발도 내게 나로디 제 아니 지금 날들이 메시시행이 저기 전에 나자 것이 자 랭이야 말봐 제가 담부께바 뒤에 제 로야 말이 봐도 동에게 나와 뒤에 저기 것이 자세야 말봐 아니 타르 지게 바로 들어와 뒤에 강것이 않는 주주로 봐 아니 뒤에 좀이 봐서
So then after that, there is meditation on what is referred to as 6 types of suffering within samsara in general, and this is mentioned in the text here when it says, furthermore, once I have taken birth in cyclic existence by the power of actions and affective emotions, I have not gotten beyond the nature of suffering. So therefore, so long as one's birth is propelled by afflictive emotions and karma or karma actions, one is still within the bound of suffering, one has not transcended suffering. So with these 6 types of sufferings in samsara are discussed here. So the first suffering is the suffering that there is no certainty with respect to friends and enemies, and so there is no certainty with respect to who will help one and who will harm one. So therefore, it's that kind of first suffering is expressed here as enemies can become friends and friends can also become enemies. I have no confidence in those who help and those who harm. So therefore, there is a lack of confidence in those who harm and oneself, those who can harm oneself or help oneself. Now, the second suffering here is that the suffering that the desire to enjoy happiness within samsara can never be quenched or satisfied. That's the second suffering. So it says, no matter how much I enjoy the happiness of secular existence, there is no point at which I will be satisfied. But in fact, instead of gaining some sort of lasting satisfaction through enjoying samsaric happiness, one's own desire or attachment will multiply and to increase in intensity because of repeated enjoying, and therefore strong attachment will give rise to therefore unbearable sufferings. And then the next suffering is lack of confidence or reliance on one's own body, even though one may have attained a beautiful physical body and so forth, but one has to discard one's body life after life after life. So that is what's mentioned here. Thus, I have no confidence in obtaining a body. Thus, I cannot actually rely on obtaining a body. And then the next suffering is that there is no limit to number of births that one will take and that one has taken. And this is expressed here as I have taken conception repeatedly since beginningless time, there is no perceptible limit to births. And then the last one is that there is no reliance or confidence in the luxuries of secular existence. And so no matter how many luxuries or marvels of secular existence I have attained, including wealth and so forth, that I must give them up or discard them in the end. So therefore one cannot actually cultivate reliance or confidence in samsaric luxuries. And then the last one is the lack of confidence with respect to companions or friends. That the fact is that when one takes birth, one comes alone. When one suffers from some sort of sickness, physical sickness, one has to suffer that alone. One cannot share that with others. And then one actually passes to the next life. One also has to go alone. So therefore, that basically shows that there is no confidence or reliance to one's own friends. So that's actually expressing. I can have no confidence in my companions because I must go beyond this world alone in companionship. So these are 6 types of sufferings that are described as suffering.
집을 좀 해봐라. 집을 팔을 좀 좋은데 시들려봐. 이데메스다. 이 과지 과지 등에다 제가 등이 단데티 과지 등에들라 주디 네 대람네 과지 지라들 주디샤 얘는 등에 계산 받쳐야지 신다지는 과지 등에 선받들려 등에 주 선받 등에 계산 받 등에 숨 선받어요 다 단데티 과지 등에 선받들려 대람나 주 선받이 과지 등에 선받들려 잘 네 니 계산부터 니 등에 선물 잘해요. 또 남들.
So, with regard to sufferings of samsara in general, or general sufferings of samsara, in the path of bliss, the 6 types of sufferings that I mentioned this morning are actually described as general sufferings. Usually, in other lumbering teachings, what we find is in general description of sufferings of samsara, you find mention of 6 types of sufferings, and then 8 types of sufferings, and then 3 types of sufferings. But in the Delam, in the path of bliss, the 8 types of sufferings are actually mentioned as referring to sufferings of human beings, so particular suffering. Generally speaking, the 8 sufferings are also mentioned as an overall samsaric suffering.
No, the sati pabotomi the satine datuni 계산받이 satine 지동에 상을 차려야 돼. 동네 계 satine 동네 지를 차려서 대남들 동네 주지다 계 나네 타마딘두당 타마디 얘네 공부해야 돼. 저것들이 동네 딘두르샤 네 딘부디 이 동네 잘와 솔로나 교주 섭취 교섭취 시시 사무 송도가 인스다 사디네 동네 주 삼바티 제 삼바타스 지 동네 삼바티를 숨 제송아 디지제 사디네 숨나 시제 다 대남나 동네 주 삼바티 지 동네 삼바티 제기나네 타마디 동네 그 된도를 지제 정부디 아니 미 동네를 잡아요. 제가 지난 제 개디 지 동네를 제기해 봐. 다디 단데 샴디는 거.
개버디 두르는 샤. 개버디 두르는 샤.
말 된도 동네 그 된도가.
그렇지.
그제 된도를 잘 아니 담부 동부디 동네를 잘.
So, in the Delam, or the path of bliss, it is mentioned that the 6 types of sufferings are discussed within the context of general sufferings within samsara, and the 8 types of sufferings that are usually in other teachings, in other texts like Asanga's category of ground, sade. There Asanga actually describes also the 8 types of sufferings as referring to samsaric suffering in general, but it is a unique presentation in the path of bliss that the 8 types of sufferings, the first 7 are discussed as being referring to sufferings of human beings, and the last one of the 8 types of sufferings is actually discussed as a summary presentation of suffering in general. So it is the position of the path of bliss, that if we presented this eight sufferings in this way, then it has much more transformative power. So this will be discussed later on.
that 동해 주디 님이 주단자스 두가 단데 디셰디 님이 주단자스 네버 메베 동해 주시야 디단자스 두가 단데 디셰디 자스 사데네 수르담체 조제 시딘레셰 단데 디 동해 주디 대한기 동해 주지 동해 주시야디 조 사데네 숨베 시딘레 숨베인스.
So the six types of sufferings, that, as referring to the samsara in general, are slightly mentioned in Asanga's study or category of ground, and then in detail it is actually explained in Shieting or Letter to a Friend by Acharya Nagarjuna.
다 단데 동네 두부디 패진 메답에 공주스 메답에 공주를 봐. 네 가서 그래. 리터발라. 그래서 신야 코어 데 랭기 기지 그래서 동네 주 장이 어제 동네 신야 코어한테 랭기 온 개와 지금 친지 동네기랑 실에 만들지 자니도 주로 아니에 자를 주어 스제브라 이 메다베다 내주지 띵게라 이 강글로 뭐 강글로 메다베 내주 때문에 인사 메다베 공주를 때문에 내메 단대 동에 주디.
So also the six types of sufferings that we discussed this morning, referring to the general sufferings within samsara, are also methods of meditating on impermanence, as can be actually understood. If you look at each of these six sufferings, like how one cannot rely on friends and how one cannot rely on one's body and so forth, these are all because of the fact that they change. So therefore, these six sufferings are also methods of actually meditating on impermanence.
That another dinner that ready in a sugar in the Kua Pinto Chism Toja Tar never Torque Pinto Togali Jemmy said the Kua Pinto Candid Tornea Tar and a Torque was Chivasi Torque Machi Condo and a Tolema Butiera Ulu the Tambo Chubuja Chubujet in a young Ulu Haka the Chinia Chubuja to Mamatuga. 디 편도 코에 편도 간 탈도 그 집어지 이 메다베란 시팅도 봐. 네. 마시고라야 니 의주기 냐바 메바. 그거 주부야 주부야 어딘데 야라 맞잖아. 근도 코에 편도라 제장 털자 타라 냐바로 돌그 편도 더라 이 때문에 해야 되지.
So, for example, that one cannot rely on wealth and luxury within samsara. As I mentioned this morning, one of the sufferings is actually also teaching on impermanence or meditation on impermanence. That one can become wealthy, and one even in one lifetime, prior to one's passing away, one can become wealthy, and then one can become poor, and then one can again become wealthy, and so forth. So therefore, that kind of change with respect to luxuries or wealth can happen within one's own lifetime. And then at the end of death, of course, we have to leave everything behind. So that is also not just, that is, we can see that is also a meditation on impermanence as well.
That in Ruganane, Mamba Neve, Donate, 도쇼 디다티 인스 몸바메바티.
So of the six types of sufferings, the suffering of inability to satisfy, the suffering of being not able to achieve contentment is actually regarded as the worst of sufferings.
어디 그때 저지도 몸바메바 스타티 몸바메바티 도쇼 인스 준주레스 사우다 순다 라베 동에 동아이 너네 폰트 타예 시버자 너라 차베 이용 주바나 시베 동에 레드 감네 덴데 남라 텔라 소 니미 망라 농 니미 망라 농중대 니미 망부 펜도 중아 신다 덴베 주다 이 다디 그런 소리 그때 저기도 못하자 몸바메바 동네 디근지 나네 도시인데스 누가 그 대조를 지금 도자 몸바메바티니 디 동네 근기 나네 도시인데 몸베체를 제베 몸바티 지 옮기지 지 이제 저는 디 소삼바르지 디그 도삼사르 제제 그에 대조를 제정나 그래서 원배치를 제발래 니마리리 신공주매발 시바 제체를 패네 다른 동네를 잘로스 어디 야 동네 두고 디나네다 원바매베 동네디 시작에 독쇼디스 디가르르스나 원배치를 제베 니마리리 신공주매바지 그제 지존에다 디가리아 지지 누기여봐 세바 지질페 아니 표알했더니 양교지 배중지 배바치다지 강내시다죠 아니 타르둥일 잘었어 디기 배바친 버지라 동일 지그리스 강내 몸불
So, of the six types of sufferings, the suffering of inability to quench one's thirst, or so to speak, or quench one's desire, is regarded as the worst form of suffering. And the reason for that is because of limitless desire, and because of our inability to satisfy one's desire or quench one's desire, we engage in enjoyment of more sensual desires, and we engage in more sensual kind of gratification with the hope that it is going to be satisfied or quenched. But in the process, instead of actually quenching one's desire, craving or desire keeps on increasing. That kind of process further intensifies one's craving and desire, and ultimately that leads to suffering. So this is what is also mentioned in Shantideva's Bodhisattva's way of life.
어디 근데 준주나는 담바 사베 동에스지 다지 더바 친구 전에 다 직변조 사야리 강에만 붙여고 담보 사베 동에 사자도 좀 봐송에 동에 다 대중교 지역이 되야 강에만 붙여게라 그냥 지 사자도 좀 봐. 야 세나기 너무 미치겠지. 랑기 너무 노주도 되게 아마 세네 온게 지 사찬에 노주야기 치도 서기야리 사차도야 세네 온게 노주도 믿들어지 아니 달 소한다 라베 동에 탈을 라베 동에 다지 mambu치듯이 탈을 담보 숨 사도 좀 바꾸는 mambu치겠어 사차도 좀 세네 온게랑 노주도 믿는 봐 세네 온게 노주 믿는 것이 다 탈치었잖아 야 제월 톤에 눈에 빠지면 어디에서 준주래 사단 숨다 라베 동네 노주 풍주 타에 시작해서 어디 예 뭐만 해볼자
So in Shanti there was one example of inability to satisfy one's desire or quench one's desire or to cultivate contentment is discussed within the context of wealth, that if we are not able to cultivate contentment, then we wanted to gain wealth, and so in the process of trying to acquire wealth, we go through different types of sufferings, mental and physical sufferings, and then once we achieved wealth, or once we obtained wealth, then out of stinginess or miserliness, we are not able to use it, then that becomes another form of mental suffering. The suffering of protecting the wealth that is so acquired with a lot of difficulty. And then finally, in a failure to enjoy wealth, then finally leads to the suffering of mental suffering of having to part with it at the time of death. So therefore, these are in Shantideva actually describe this as a type of suffering that is there, that happens because of our inability to cultivate contentment. So therefore, inability to quench one's thirst or desire or to cultivate contentment is actually seen as the worst of the sufferings, of the 6 types of sufferings.
다디네 마마 무슨 로두기 너는 군지 나네 초시바 라죠 라바라 아미 tumbe송스다 이 님부터 가르치었으면 다 초시디 시리임bre 뭐바메데 님부터 다 초시지야디 다디기 중간에 이 야부인 선물 초시지야디 니 초이지 다 놀기 초시인지 초시지는 그런 주부인벌이다 초시면은 다든도 의부인벌이다 나단도 주부인 선물지 그제네 어디에서 어디 손도가
So Nagarjuna mentions that the antidote to our failure to cultivate, to our failure to quench our desire or thirst is the cultivation of contentment. And so Nagarjuna describes contentment as the supreme of all wealth. That if you are contented, then you are wealthy. That if you are not contented, even if you are wealthy, you are not wealthy. So this is what Nagarjuna says as how contentment is the antidote to quenching of desire.
다디네 디 동네 제 삼았다 다티네 되네 동네 영화 다티네 되지 동네 자원에 방배 타바초 톱친 된두이 고급 토마토 나지 레선도 편버사이나 생겨서도 좀 다티 된지 진짜 프로지부지 다 되나 다기 niebarkashi sta ne chubuti samne tena daagi niebarkashi niena denchebe denjo tobe dindere kue donge tada pambe lama sanji juko barambu chichene chatoba jawu teta chine ba lama le chingila sui shio suwa tebe jui lama le ani kui chale tujena ngaru sida jebe kwenpa rashi sanja tamjegi lusini shu teta di geche chang, teta di toba kiba jen shingi gyore kiba samu sawa di tatine diga de sam tsasu na diga sam ngere rine sam diga sam tsasu na da inye baga shinyana tenjo kuwe dunge tada pangbe da kuwe dunge 타다밤에 타바조야 더 생기 그만 타바쇼스 다단데 동에데 삼게 동에데 다 제베 타바조 생기 그만 타바쇼 데다 지네 발라만에 지니도 소아다 발라테니 아니 꾸이 차례 뒤집힌 거 아니 데다 뒤기지자 또밖에 받진 길에 내가지 어디 되지 과지 동에 서비스
So then, at the end of this, after contemplating on the 6 types of sufferings, then you make supplication to the Guru Deity that you have visualized earlier on top of your crown, that you be able to realize or gain the realization of understanding or realizing these 6 types of sufferings within samsara. And through these develop the wish or the intention to gain freedom from the sufferings of cyclic existence. And so you pray to the Guru to bless you that you be able to achieve that realization. And in response to that, as before, then you visualize the descending of the 5-colored nectar with rays from the Guru Deity into your crown, filling your entire body and the body of all sentient beings that you have visualized around yourself. And with this, you go to the same visualization like earlier, that your bodies transform into a body that is pristine, clear, and radiant. And then you visualize that your lifespan and merit and so forth increased, and that you are able to eliminate all obstacles that hinder you from achieving the realization of understanding these sufferings, and then cultivate the conviction that you generate this exceptional, unique realization of realizing the sufferings of samsara in general.
다때 거지 수수 지다 니가 거와 수수 동에 상반이스 지라마 라곰신베 나네 지들삼디 년이 중부 시급 친제 동에 기란 시간만 되디스 다디 인구를 지제네다 도나세테스 이게 예르마 인도를 자나스 딱한제 년이 중부 시급 친제 동에를 시간만 되스 녀소순도 담에자 지그 니 년이 통도 주발라 때네 다 녀소순 근데 녀소순도 담에자 지그 녀소순이 동에 풍부 주나다 아니 동에 여봤다 메자 지그스 리스 니 년이 풍부 주발라 때네 아니 풍부 될 때네 아니 제금스 풍부 될 때네 다 제베 동에 mi phumbu te shara peche phumbu te chuba insa jebe tungi yungu le gombe tungi yungu jeba to kumba ta ani jeba ta kumba ta ani 다 제가 근데 동네 제 지금 아니 철 좋아하다 니도 제와다 잠이도 보다 제와다 대변부 제장 많이 지 면도변부터 봐봐다 예간나치 소게 동네는 스타티리샤 제가 동네 계세야 되지 제공그 동네 지지 철주당 철 저다 들어왔어 철주당 니도 보다 제와스 아란주 니도 보사 다 제와스도 니도 보다 랑게 실 배 이동 니도 보다 제선은 동네 지게를 봐 그 간제 랑지 배 셈을 요바티 예배 뭐 이네 다 가리네 두버티 제주도 잠바 라스도 피는 라베타 다 제주도 잠바 동네 지키기를 봐 잠이 두버다 체베 동네스 아니 다르버든지 체순 체베 동네에 봐 대병은 부터讲明 봐 대병은 부터讲 아니 네 가보지 여러분 면도배는 거 토도 봐 면도배디 아니 제국이야 말이 만드는 내용 아니 토도 봐 서로 맞는 양 용기 여러분 어디 면도배는 거 토도 봐 아니 제외 동네 가외 동네 나외 동네 지외 동네 어디 다디 되게 미 동네를 샤브 동네 제트
So then, the second actual practice is contemplating the particular sufferings or sufferings of particular sentient beings within particular realms. And so, we start with sufferings within the human realm. And so once again, you meditate on the Lama deity seated upon your crown, and then you meditate or contemplate like this. That so long as one has obtained this psychophysical aggregate, which is propelled by karma and afflictions, then one is in the nature of suffering, that one has not transcended suffering. So if that is the case, then the text says, what is there to consider what need is there to consider the sufferings of lower realms or the three bad transmigrations when samsara in general, so long as our psychophysical aggregate is propelled by klesha, negative emotions and karma, then we are bound to suffer. There's no need to consider or mention the sufferings of lower realms. So with this, so this is the initial contemplation that we engage in as a way to summarize suffering within samsara. And then we go to the sufferings of a human person or human suffering within human realm. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 8 types of sufferings that are usually discussed as sufferings of samsara in general are actually related to sufferings of a human person as in the path to bliss. So the 8 types of sufferings are here mentioned in the text. Here it says, depending on having the appropriate aggregates, appropriated means basically the psychophysical aggregate compiled by Karma and Klesha, the human person, one undergoes the sufferings of hunger and thirst. So that this is the first suffering, the suffering of hunger and thirst. The second suffering is as related to a human person, the suffering of having to go to look for desired things. So that is going to search for desired things. That's suffering. And the third suffering is suffering of having to separate from attractive friends and relatives. So separate from friends and relatives that are kind of desirable or pleasant or attractive to oneself. And then the fourth suffering is the suffering of having to come across with unattractive or unpleasant things like enemies and so forth. Then the fifth suffering is suffering of having to search for but not finding the desired object. The fifth suffering is the suffering of undesired falling upon oneself. And then the fifth suffering is the suffering of birth. Then the next suffering is suffering of sickness, and then the eighth suffering is the suffering of death. So this is what is mentioned here.
다디 대남나기 동네 계정 주주장 나 친구들과 남면들 디나를 지단기 남디나를 전에 동네 계대 딘데스 정글이 계대 동네 가외 동네 나외 동네 지치 메두바도 체베 동네 두바도 체베 동네 devemos ter caminhas dona nyeri kumbu no signere kumbu tiche jani oti shagerba tan dinala kariya risena tegum ne chiche sorduli kidunesche tini mindu nie dubata teres chita dubata tewase tu Dingin nie tu bata tewas, kami tu bata tewas, tuga. Hai shindati nana tu bata tewas, mi tu bata tewas. Bene tu bata tewas le, ngobu yidu wa kande chi ne, kita tewas ne, ya tinggal haba chiki derma. Nie ta tewas ne, nie tu bata tewas ne, tinggal kiri yare. Tebe ngobu te ji, ngobu yidu wa kita tewas ne, tinggal kiri derma, tu bata tewas ne. 담이 두바스야 된디나 담이 두바스 쳐버려. 미두바스 쳐서는 미두바스야 돼. 미두베 먹을지. 네 중순에 미두바스 쳐버려. 잘했지 중에 미두바스 쳐. 미두베 먹을 때까지 취지 버렸지 전에. 매지 버렸지 전에 미두바스 쳐버려. 디스쳐서 디 devemos botar jansa mani bati bache deve algum botou de bati bache que ganati se tá doce de que ganati se me de bache devemos tá do me de bache que ganata 제금다 소줄 세시도가 니지 그도가 계기가 신다기는 계스다야디 디나 주기스르시도가 제금 당스지지 손줄 당스지 니에도 버다자와스 잠에도 버다자 제가 시제 devemos botar meninas devemos botar todo para assistir queres uma tu de que tu na vez tu que tu cale na vez tu chive tu nes tu se rede tem também né tu que tu tu
근데 대감나가 제대로 보시 걔가 마치 참만 걔와 가와 나 치워 시절 당한 고쳐 걔와 가와 치워 chiwa gawa, chiwa china,
주
degamnama.
제공 지제
Oh,
소줄세야 지제 니제
no,
니도 버터 되었어
so
다음에도 버터 되었지 대부분 버터 양이니까
no.
니 대부분 뭐 그거 아니 게 가외도 나외도 치
주체로.
주도가 다 뒤에서 근데 주차배는 다 간제 신단을 지동에 계산받이 디나를 내동을 차 자도가 어디디 제금다 소들세야 되는 멘트들이 되게 간 지 동에 계산받어야 되리 기타 내동을 차 수수동을
남림나라는 뭐지? 농에 탐바디 있는지 풍복,
그냥 공부스지
이 농에 직지로.
아
있는지 풍복이 농에 탐바지로.
네
So, what you find is that in other Lamrim teachings, when we discuss the 8 types of sufferings of samsara in general, which I mentioned that those 8 types of sufferings of samsara in general are actually explained as referring to sufferings of a human person or sufferings within human realm here. But if you look at the enumeration of those 8 types of sufferings, then there's a slight difference between the 8 types of sufferings that are usually discussed in Lamrim teachings as referring to suffering of samsara in general, and these 8 types of sufferings that are kind of mentioned here. In fact, so in the Lamrim teachings, usually when you count the 8 types of sufferings of samsara in general, then those are first of all the suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, and then suffering of death, 4 types of sufferings, and then suffering of coming across with undesirable objects. So here in the path of bliss, that is actually mentioned as meeting with or coming across with unattractive enemies. But generally that is with unattractive objects. So that could be enemy, or it could be even like sickness, or it could be some sort of unattractive event. So it is not necessarily enemy. So that is one difference. And likewise, the other suffering is separating from attractive friends and relatives. This is actually mentioned in the path of bliss. But in general, Lamrim teachings, it is actually described as separation from, desirable or attractive things. So that is not necessarily exclusive to being friends and relatives. It could be a happy occasion. It could be like health and so forth. When you're separate from those, that gives rise to suffering. So then, in the general Lamrim tradition, the 8 types of sufferings are the 4 types of suffering, like birth, aging, and so forth. Then the next is coming across separation from desirable objects. Then coming across with undesirable objects. And then the 7th one is not finding desirable objects, which is the same as in the path of bliss. And then the 8th suffering is actually enumerated as the suffering of having achieved a psychophysical aggregate that is propelled by karma and negative emotions. It's just the fact of having obtained a psychophysical aggregate is regarded as suffering in itself. So therefore we see that there are some differences. In fact, in the path of bliss, there are actually 10 sufferings altogether. If you count everything, there are 10 sufferings. But the idea is that there's a great resemblance between the 8 types of sufferings that is usually discussed within the Lamrim context as 8 types of sufferings as referring to samsara in general, and the 10 types of suffering that is mentioned in the Delam, path of bliss, which is related to or referred to as specifics of suffering. sufferings, specific to human beings.
다드네. 다디 남자 신은 제나 게 동네 제들 동네 제야 게 동네는 가외 동네는 치외 동네는 나외 동네는 치외 동네는 스치
So in Yushu or other Lamrim teachings, each of these 8 sufferings have again 5, sub-sufferings, so to speak. So the suffering of birth has 5 sufferings, suffering of aging has 5 types of sufferings, sickness has 5 types of sufferings, death has 5 types of sufferings, and so forth.
다디제 다드네. 이번 그와수수만 다디제 제가나지. 단 하마인지 라마인지 동네 삼바스다 니 동네 삼바티 찾으라. 단 하마인지 동네 하마인지 내내지 공부 들어가라 때네. 하이 배주를 내수도 차도지 이동의 동네당 이동의 동네 차도기 이동의 동네지. 될 때네 우리 토도 거기 동네 이 차도기 동네 될 때는 우리 토도 거기 동네스. 그 랭이는지 공부를 들어가라더니 어떻게 하마인지 동네들이 벤조를 메수베 타이 벤조를 메수베 차도 이도 이전에 하다 탑네 아니 류제 발라수베 류기 때문에 받으면 되는 거지.
So then we move to the suffering of demigods. Then in the text it says, depending on having the appropriated, or basically substantial aggregate of a demigod, one experiences the suffering of mental anguish caused by unbearable jealousy of the god's will, and based on that suffering which descends upon one's body. So what is mentioned here is the demigods, their predominant mental suffering is suffering of jealousy, of seeing the world of God, and because of that jealousy, they fight with God, and then because of that, they experience physical suffering in the conflicts and wars between gods and demigods.
다데는 돌에 풍부 주발할 때는 하마인다 탑하다 야라제바다 류제바다 서버서 기둥이 mention chidena bodi pepe joroda tene nesungu tuni nyonga shebe tuni stati dole pumbu tubala tene hamayinda tabata dole ta hamayinda tabata yala jeba tabala tene yala jebata ani jewata 서버스기 동네지 메두시도 다 메두시도 치대가 아파 봤어. 치외 뒤에서는 다 샤드용기 치외리 샤드용기는 진짜 아니 치대가 아프고요. 저 치대가 보이는데 좀 동네 메시버다. 아니 하이네 그 저걸 하이 내내 밥 제야로 제 되네. 어떻게 근데 지대가야리 지대가 알레 그래서 지대가 포디 해배줄 다 되네 내 숨고도 내놓을 시바 다 저라도 소리야 그래서 지대 포인트 대변조 때문에 내 손도 제가 연구가 신이 딱 시기 우리 의식을 소리지 내 손도 내 연구가 시에 동해서 감고만이 니네 풍부 쪽자 내발라라면 다 감고만이부터 수다 수민이 수다 수민이부터 아니 그래서 그래 수다 수민이부터 니네 풍부 쪽자 내발라라면 맞춰서 니네 풍부 쪽아래데 아니 니네 풍부 때도 내기를 해서 내게 말이야 기치 제고야 근데 타바 토스는 이 근데 진행수는 이게 때도 네 두개 여러 감고만이 니네 풍부 쪽자 내발라라면 맞춰서 우리 길에서 뭐 세도 치기야리 치는 니네 풍부 또 네 템바세는 내 손도 좀 동네 바도네 유스 어디 다 수미나 아니 수비 풍부야 말이지 풍부 시행시기 뒤에 저의 풍부 뒤지 나바시 풍부 어떠수 도를 동네에서 동네 아니 내 손길에 동네 야리스
So then, the suffering of gods are then discussed. Then it says there are three types of gods belonging to the three realms: gods of the desire realm, gods of the form realm, and then gods of the formless realm. So therefore, their sufferings or particular sufferings are discussed here. So first of all, the gods of the desire realm. It says, depending on having the aggregates of a god of the desire realm, when fighting with the demigods, one has the suffering of loss of limbs, or one's body splitting open, killing, and so forth. So therefore, the gods in the desire realm engage in constant battle with demigods, and so therefore, they have to undergo sufferings of being killed and so forth in the wars. And then one of the unique sufferings is that they are confronted by the 5 signs of death, and then the suffering of knowing that one must separate from the world of the gods and has to undergo the suffering of the bad transmigrations or bad rebirths. So what is mentioned here is that the gods, 1 week before their death, they have these definite signs of their death, and then they have to go through tremendous mental suffering, knowing that they're going to die, and also knowing that they have to separate from the world of the gods. And it is also said that they have a unique suffering because a week before their death, they actually know that they're going to take rebirth in the lower realms, because all of their good karma have been exhausted through use, and so because of this clairvoyance that they're now going to take rebirth in the lower realms, give rise to tremendous mental suffering. And so then the gods of the higher realms, that of the form and formless realms, even though they don't have the suffering of having to engage in battle with the demigods, their unique suffering is that that they do not have the independence to remain there forever, that they have to again discard their form and their rebirth, and then they transmigrate as well. So for gods of the form realm, then they have a physical form, so therefore they have to leave that, and then they also, because of their karma being exhausted, the possibility that they're going to actually end up in lower realms is very much there, and they know it through clairvoyance, so they have that suffering. And with respect to the god of the formless realm, even though they don't have physical form, but nonetheless, after remaining in that state of bliss for many years, lifetimes, that they, finally, when the force of the karma that propelled them to be in that state is exhausted, they once again have to discard that form and then transmit to the lower realms. But with respect to the formless gods, of the 5 psychophysical aggregates, they don't have the form of the five aggregate of form, but they have the remaining four aggregates of feeling, discrimination, compositional actions, and consciousness, and they have to discard that, and then they take rebirth in lower realms as well. So they have these sufferings.
단도나 년행지 본부디 천디 대가나지 대지 동네다 유래 동네지 대지 어다 먼저 너나 알아도 가르쳐 대가나지 동네스 동네들아 다 동네 순상바디 유래 동네 개 동네가 동네 유래 동네 잡아두지 동네스 잡아두지 동네스야 년행 본부디 동네 결혼시도 통주들이 어떤 데에서다 년행이 풍부디 다 동네 탐색에 자와디다 년행 풍부디 걸 자와서 그러면 중국이 시티 년행 풍부디 두가 인사네 동네 개부디 년행 풍부디도 있는데 두가 인사 아니 동네 두부디 동네 순부디 년행 풍부 디 두가라 되는 중앙에서 다 년행 풍부디 동네 결혼시도 통구이래 자사 디 통해야 될다 동네 안에가 동네 디 동네 그라시도 통해야 돼 나도 전주 순제를 유지해 동네 세대 나외 동네 내가 나사람 지중서나 동네 세대 그 중앙다 초 랑게 쌈도 강에 되니 유심의 강에 되니 동네들 동네 교회 성에서야 당부 두두 잠바지 유심의 아니 디도 동네에 좋아 잡고 만들자 계진이 벌파 동네 좋아 잡고 대주니 교회 동네에 시판 동네들이 교회 동네에서 다도서 교회 동네에 아니 인주글로디 치르발에 교회 잡지 지나투모지 동네들의 멘트글로디 돈주 순제리 교회 교회 동네에 멘트글로디야디 치르발에 야리스 아니 다 남북이 체주디 동네기 캬바두지고 동네디 동네 계란시 두시고 다 캬바두지고 동네디 가르셔서는 년행 풍부들이 캬바두지고 동네에서 다 간거로 년행 풍부들 두발을 때는 종수나 디 좋아해서 년행 풍부디 동네 탐지의 중국으로 지금부터 시행하고요. 대신에 년행 풍부들 돈도 그렇게 해야 되는 년행 풍부들 도서나 도에 차들은 크로알리 주의식이었다. 년행 풍부 어디 단지 탐에게 남이 풍부 취재 된도가 많이 됐어. 당기 교육결스 교육을 계속해서 CBS 책세 타버드가 지인바 어디에서다 년이 풍부디 동네계라 신도 통네 델레 탄두글로 계속나데 타버드니글로 쓰기였다.
Then here it says, in short, these appropriate aggregates basically means karmic aggregate, karmically propelled aggregates, act as the basis for this life's birth, aging, sickness, death, and so forth, and induce both the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change in these and future lifetimes. From the mere existence of the psychophysical aggregates themselves, one is established as having the nature of the aggregate of compositional factors, which is under the influence of former actions and affective emotions. So, what is discussed here is basically, in essence, to understand that this karmically propelled psychophysical aggregate is the basis of all sufferings. And that is basically the heart of generating renunciation and the intention to gain liberation. So long as we have this karmically propelled psychophysical aggregate, it acts as the basis for all types of sufferings that we discussed. The 6 types of sufferings, the 8 types of sufferings, and also the 3 types of sufferings. Usually we talk about 3 types of sufferings: suffering of change, and all-pervasive suffering or conditioned suffering. So the all-pervasive or conditioned suffering really refers to the psychophysical aggregate itself. And that is the basis of all sufferings. The 6 types of sufferings, the 8 types of sufferings, and there's 2 types of suffering: suffering of change and suffering of suffering. And to therefore understand that the psychophysical aggregate is the conditioned suffering, is the all-pervasive suffering, and to actually understand that as suffering is the most difficult thing to do. Of the 3 types of sufferings, it is said that the first type of suffering of suffering, is something that can be identified as suffering even by animals. So these types of sufferings refers to physical pain, sickness, and so forth. The suffering of suffering. So these sufferings are suffering that is, identified or experienced or understood as suffering by animals as well. Then the next suffering is suffering of change. And the suffering of change really refers to those seemingly moments of happiness, but because of their virtue of being transitory or impermanent, they quickly change into nature of suffering. And this, to understand suffering of change as suffering, as being in the nature of suffering, is something that is common to both Buddhist and non-Buddhist Hindus. And the Hindus also identify suffering of change as suffering, and they engage in practices to get rid of this. But then the third type of suffering, which is the all-pervasive suffering or conditioned suffering, which really refers to the psychophysical aggregate as propelled by negative emotions, karma. And to actually understand all-pervasive suffering as being in the nature of suffering, this is only something that is understood by Buddhists, or it is something that is taught as being in the nature of suffering in the Buddhist teachings. And ultimately, when we talk about generating renunciation, generating genuine, authentic renunciation, with which comes the intention to gain liberation, we're talking about understanding the all-pervasive suffering, the conditioned suffering as suffering. To understand, which basically means understanding our own psychophysical aggregate as being in the nature of suffering. Once we have understood that, then renunciation is generated, then the wish to seek liberation is generated because of that.
that's gave it to me, I said, gave it to me, not even Susan Yambas, Susan Buddha Yambas, Dog Yambas, Ombu Yambas, Yula Long Juba Yambas, Sin Yambas. That's it, don't pull the yerba. Or just gave it to me, not in the shade.
So earlier I mentioned that the 8 types of sufferings also have 5 sub-sufferings with each of them. So for example, with respect to the suffering of aging, there are 5 associated or related sufferings. And the first is the suffering of degeneration of one's own physical beauty. And then the next is the suffering of degeneration of one's physical strength and vitality. Then the next suffering is the suffering of degeneration in one's sense faculties. Then the next suffering, the fourth suffering, is the suffering of not being able to enjoy objects of desire, sense objects. And then the last suffering is the suffering of degeneration in one's lifespan.
Then now doing ngadi, Lee Guru doing GJ. Lee Joel then he made a shit period doings. Then long Jew, you meant long Jew, the woman to sit that long Jew had to see the water so long Jew meant long Jew, you can't and long Jenny, color nation of many of which. donation many 아니 예명 longe 멘드 예명 스티다디 되네 멘드신도 제거 멘드신도 제거 다디 아지 가리네 멘드신도 매생이 만드네 제거 스타고 아니 지도에 멘주로지 샤주르 수바 근데 지제네 멘드신도 제거 아니 이제 아니 소다테와스
So then, with respect to suffering of sickness, again the 5 associated sufferings are, first of all, the suffering of transformation in the body, also in terms of physical health and energy and so forth. So that is actually described as transformation in the body. So that's the first suffering. And then the second suffering is as a result of there being physical change or transformation, it gives rise to intense mental suffering. So the mental suffering is part of sickness. Then that is the intense mental suffering, second suffering, associated suffering. Then the third suffering is not being able to enjoy usually desirable objects like good food and so forth. Then the next suffering is, the fourth suffering is having to take things that are not enjoyable, like medicine. And also to go through surgery and so forth. And the last one is actually the associated suffering of sickness is that Drumisha said don't mention the last one now. That's on page number 7, you can read it. So the last suffering is the suffering of eventual death. Is actually counted as an associated suffering of sickness.
다치에 등에나 리다 롱지다 저진 걸다 제가 따라서 치에 등에 리다 롱지다 저진 걸다 제가 저진 세트 거린 라타타 자스제 지금 세트 또 다워 자기 지금
자꾸 찡하지. 자꾸 찡하지.
어제 루이다 대화제 농주다 대화제 디르바 치레체 루이다 대화 농주다 대화 아니 치레체 자진다 대화 스쿼르다 대화스 등에 이미 대화 타고 놓았어 이 이리지.
So then with respect to the suffering of death, the associated sufferings are having to part with one's body, having to part with one's wealth and possessions, having to part with one's family and relatives, and then intense mental suffering.
어때네? 뒤가도 저 인산 지름도 소상이야. 사초도 팀 중요해 팀. 나지 나와 제도 팀들도 소. 사초도 팀들이야. 중요해 팀들이야. 근데 맞대. 뒤 지름도 소 상이야 유서.
So in this context, when we reflect on the suffering of death, because the path of bliss is actually related to tantric practices, this is actually taught in conjunction with tantric practice, then here we can think about the dissolution process at the time of death, the elemental dissolution, earth element dissolving into water, water into fire, fire into wind, and so forth, as a way of transforming death as well.
다디네 미두가 제외 동네 들링나 미두가 체로 좀 동네 지지 디 체베 디 체베 주바 체베 좀 동네 지 근데 디기 미두가 자로 중선을 자디 체베 체베 주지 제베 주부터 제베 집아스 아니 땅내기 집아지 냐스고 시레시로 다 땅내기 집아지 냠나신 집에 집아지 치워 년주를 집아스 집에 어떤 년주를 제와이 따딘적이지 잘렸더니 이제 시선에 미치로 동네 그렇게 집었어.
미두부터 책.
자매두부터 책 동네서.
So then the again the associated sufferings of the suffering of coming across with undesirable object. So there are five again associated sufferings. The first suffering is the suffering of coming across with undesirable object in the first place. That is basically coming across with an enemy and so forth. And then the second associated suffering is so first of all, just coming across with an undesirable object, whether it be an enemy or anything, gives rise to suffering. And then the second is then the suffering that the enemy might actually inflict harm. So the harm caused by that enemy becomes the second associated suffering. And then the third suffering is that the enemy might cause disrepute or criticize or bring bad names to oneself, to rumors and so forth. And then the fourth suffering is the suffering of having to endure intense mental suffering. And then the fifth suffering is the suffering of possible death because of coming across with undesirable objects, enemy being just one of them.
되네. 그래서 그래. 니도 보다 제대로 되는 니에서 제대로 선배냥이 지스 냥이 지기를 봐. 근데 맹한 좀 봐지. 냥이 그 지만 좀 봐. never give us. Any young and it's Lilia, Lilia never give in Vietnam. Any Dini Jensin, Debe, Yitung. Dini Yang Jensin. And in Deva Digi Yitung us, what it is.
Tini Tenshin
Debe,
Debe,
Yitung.
Di Shibadra.
네, 나가 어디를 시거들이 디롱주 마창 동 디롱주 마창 동이 다디 롱주 마창 인사 니도 버티 대단 롱주 고가 마주와 인사 동아 주시면 디롱주 마창 동이 그루스
So then the 5 associated sufferings of having the suffering of having to separate with desirable objects. The first suffering is the suffering of the first is mental suffering, the mental suffering that one undergoes during the time of separation with desirable objects. Then the second suffering is having to utter expressions of suffering or separation. So that is actually counted as the physical expression of one's inner suffering at time of separation is counted as the second suffering. And then the third suffering is that one might actually inflict physical pain upon oneself at the time of separation. So physical injury that one might sustain or inflict upon oneself, the third suffering. Then the fourth suffering is the suffering of intense mental torture because of missing that individual person or that desirable object. So therefore it's like the intense psychological torture that one undergoes because one actually miss that particular person. Then the fifth suffering is regarded as the inability to having lost the opportunity to be with that person, that desirable person, and spend time and enjoy together. So that is actually counted as the fifth associated suffering.
다디네 데베트 뭐 제가 많이 배 동행하디 데베 뭐 제디 많이 배 semla 양에서 단다 두바다들 양에 시바 나 어디데 집에 인스도나 데베 제디 많이 배 semla 양에 집어서 두바다 잡았다 잡았어.
Then the 5 associated sufferings of the suffering of not finding desirable objects even one searched for it. And these sufferings is mentioned exactly like the suffering of having to separate with loved ones or desirable objects, including the mental suffering, starting with the mental suffering that one endures on not finding that desirable object. So exactly the same as the sufferings of having to separate with desirable objects.
년이 풍부들 동행하디 년이 풍부 치매 동행에 쓰지 나가서 이제 동행이 된도 들어가 쓰지 동행이 동행당 주례 동행이 된지 봤으니 주례 동행이 된지 주례 동행이 된지 그랬어 내년에 지수들아 등이지 누가 하잖아요 주지 동의지 라신이 두집에 다 조가 점기 년이 풍부코라 조가 점기 주지기 동네게 라시도 되어서 제대로 동네스 땅나 너한테 동네게 동네는 체
So then the uh, the suffering of having attained karmically propelled psychophysical aggregate, or which is actually referred to as all-pervasive or conditioned suffering. That is again 5 types of associated sufferings. First is that when we have this psychophysical aggregate, the first suffering is that it induces suffering in the future. It becomes the medium through which one again we engage in accumulation of negative actions and so forth. So therefore it induces future suffering. Then the second is the psychophysical aggregate becomes the basis for suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, and suffering of death. If we don't have psychophysical aggregate, we don't go through these sufferings. So it becomes the basis for these 4 types of sufferings. Then the third suffering is that it also becomes the basis of suffering of change and suffering of suffering. That is, the conditioned suffering or the suffering of psychophysical aggregate becomes the basis for suffering and suffering of change. And then the fifth suffering is that 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry. The suffering of change, the basis of suffering, and the basis of suffering of change, they are counted as 2 separate sufferings.
Okay.
Yeah. So that it becomes the basis of suffering, and then the suffering of change. And then the fifth suffering is that from its mere production, or from its mere evolution, or from its mere birth, that is the mere production or birth of psychophysical aggregate, it is produced in the nature of suffering. That psychophysical aggregate, when it is produced or when it is propelled or produced in the nature of suffering. That is all pervasive suffering. So these are the 5 types of associated suffering. So we're going to take a short break here, like 10 minutes.
다 제사 년인기 풍부 대시 아니 안도 대시도가 동네 탐지기 아니 중구 풍부 뒤인데 풍부 뒤 캐나 제리 주다 제자의 동네 탐지 케이스 제사 년인기 풍부 뒤다 동네 그런 시도 또네 어디 년인기 풍부 뒤다 더 좀 되나? 그 동네 탐지기 중국이 코레스. 그 동네 지를 켜버렸어. 지나 배나 그래서 그래. 다다 동네를 매자. 걔한테 체질 때만 타도 동네 지 추죠. 동네 풍부지. 아니 명초족이 누가 저술 많이 봐. 예스. 얘네 풍부들이야. 걔한테 체수는 동네 지 추죠. 명초족. 배 네버도 많이 봐. 야레스. 근데 네버디 감순배 실제 탐지기를 켜봐야서 아니 콜에 켜봐도 지금 얘네 풍부들. 그래. 마음의 사제기 풍부 난 듬바 다들기 풍부를 차가니 얘네 라이비 얘네 듬바다 세바니 좀 풍부되라 얘네 풍부 시작 다 얘네 풍부 세트 다들게 마음배 사직이 풍불을 두바스 디다 다달이 풍불을 차바니부터 니네스 그래서는 마음배 풍부들이 다치지네 당연한 주지 마음배 대적이 취집되는데 류대디 동이 풍부를 봐 내 마음배 대적이 취집되는데 매일 류대디 tunanya de dimbai yarwa dimbai yuche ani daje pungula chabadila nyene sigeres just rangi nyenengi dimba da seba nyere chupena yawan daje pungudi ngamari kasati maumbe 풍부를 세베 tumba 직제 다다기 풍부를 세베 tumba니 댄치게를 받고 제가 니네 풍부세야 돼 여름이야디 여름이 렘바티 세바데 렘바니 tum바다 세바니 직제 대중에 디니리 중 풍부에서 여름에 풍부세 시드가 다 간제 어디 나중에 그래서 동네기 풍부디 단다리 년이 풍부디 동네기랑 신도 쉐고야 됐다 예 준비인데
nyelele de limba da sebala limba da sebala jaba nyelense
년에서디 디니리 때는 랑바야서 년에서 디샤 아니 년이 풍부해야 돼 군일 때는 좋아해서 그 년이 풍부해
so therefore because the conditioned suffering or all-pervasive suffering, which refers to our psychophysical aggregate, which is basically the aggregate of body and mind that is propelled by negative emotions and karma, that has to be understood as the essence of our suffering. Because when we have this psychophysical aggregate, and we have this therefore conditioned all-pervasive suffering, then this becomes the cause of all other suffering of change and suffering and so forth. Because of that, we have this psychophysical aggregate that is propelled by karma and kleshas, that whenever our body and mind comes across with even a minor external condition, it gives rise to, it has a potential to give rise to suffering. So therefore, in terms of generating renunciation, or the wish to achieve liberation from samsara, which is basically our own psychophysical aggregate, we have to actually understand this psychophysical aggregate as being in the nature of suffering. So, and so once we, so the term in the Tibetan for our psychophysical aggregate is, it is described with a qualifying adjective. The psychophysical aggregate it is referred to as nyelin, and nyelin means definitely. Nyevar means definitely induced psychophysical aggregate, or it could mean nyelin could be translated as psychophysical aggregate that is product of definite craving, or definite craving or definite attachment. Nyelin means craving or attachment. So what that basically means is that all we continue to get propelled with psychophysical aggregate within samsara because of craving, because of attachment and craving to this body and mind. And so therefore, the reason why we have this psychophysical aggregate in this life is because of the in our previous life we craved for mind and we craved for psychophysical mind and psychophysical body. And likewise, our craving for so our craving for body and mind is what is going to be the main factor for giving rise to rebirth with psychophysical aggregate in future lifetimes. So therefore, generating renunciation means basically getting rid of this craving, getting rid of this desire for conditioned existence, desire for continuation physically and mentally, in the samsaric sense, propelled by desire and propelled by negative emotions. So that craving or tanha, that has to be stopped, and then that basically is another way of saying giving rise to renunciation. That is another way of saying giving rise to the thought of seeking liberation from samsara. But in order to do so, first of all, we have to actually identify psychophysical aggregate within conditioned existence as being in the nature of suffering. And so long as we are not able to give rise to this wisdom, then we will never actually seek liberation from this type of physical aggregate, liberation from conditioned existence.
이나 불안 지당 모두라면 고마 미 니네 풍부지 지당지는 동네던 동네 강극은 중내지래 이내야다 지 타베 고반도발라 루젠틴데 지 때문에 두부리야봐 이에서 전적이 최초게도 되면 미주된데 다 내가 담배 치우를 구하여서 어디 전주 최초한테 미리 루젠 타블 베기야봐 내가 드리지.
So, therefore, as practitioners belonging to the person of middle scope, person of small scope, where the intention is to gain freedom from the lower realms and to gain rebirth in the higher realms in the form of human beings and gods and so forth, then for a Mahayana practitioner, that practice is related to the person of small scope might be contradictory, because if you seek and you're attached to the higher rebirths in the form of rebirth within human realm and gods and so forth, then that amounts to continuing craving, continuing kind of attachment, craving to existence, samsara existence. But that is not the case, because as a practitioner, one does not crave conditioned rebirth, but rather as a practitioner, we see, as a Mahayana practitioner, we see that achieving or obtaining human rebirth with all the opportunity for practice of Dharma, with all the leisure and endowments for the practice of Dharma, that is actually seen as an interim destination, not a final destination, but nonetheless, something that is necessary to engage in or to continue the spiritual practice. So therefore, we don't engage in practices or circle of teachings belonging to the person's Snow Scope with craving to life or existence per se, but understanding that rebirth as human being with all the opportunities for practice is actually essential to continue on the path of Dharma practice.
디 조버다가 동네기나 시디게 댄스 파트 니버 타바드를 남기는 시대는 파바스기도가 지단 지니까 두대님이 삼라 말베나 타바드니 지심이 지심 타바드니 로킹 마스 동네레 타르에 타바동도 로킹이 아마르바 제사 동네게 삼바 두 삼바 순 삼바도 쉐브와 다 군주 코에 주린 마삼나 코에 자와 주주 미시베스 다 타바토가 아니 기 네티데 갈레 중세네 아니 레야데니 문이레 중 좋아디 셰쿠비야 디스 마시나 코에 자도 주주 시기야 말이스 코에 자와 타바토발로 코에 자와 주레토 지발라 코에 자와 무슨비야바 이세다 동네 디 코아 디 가리 코아레스는 레다 유모니라 되는 코아레스 레디아 또 유모리스 되는 중아레스 유모디아 제 자인 유모바 레들라 아니 레들라 숨이야리 그래서 그래 아니 된디 알아 중이기나 레들라 니가 뒤지기 레스야지 주거실레스 니야리 냐 펜지글레스 두지글레스 다 두수 와투글레스 자와디 녀모벌 토거제스 녀모바티를 자외 녀모버투 녀외 녀모버니슈 다 자와 녀모버투가 파타투는 아니 마리발라 토마리 세상에 못 탐지 자와디 마리바치 마리바티 있다 그래 자와다 마리바티 예바 야라 담보 마리바시아디 텐디 야라 중이 어디에서 다 단데 디나라 대란나라 팀네 동네기 네주디 지 동네 섬주 수수 동네 섬주 미슈지 때문에 아니 대주 지금 아무도 시에도가 다디는 군주 그에 요즘 삼국이 제사
So then in the path of bliss, it is mentioned that after contemplating on these particular sufferings that are specific to each of the realms, then and then what is mentioned after that is the thought of seeking liberation. Therefore, I've obtained by all means the high state of Lama Buddha, who is liberated from state existence, which has the nature of appropriate equities. Bless me, Lama Didi, to be able to do that. So therefore, after the contemplation on specific sufferings, then one is then here in this practice, one is then taught to seek liberation or generate the intention to seek liberation. Generally speaking, in the Lamrim teachings, the sequence is such that first one contemplates on the nature of suffering within samsara, both the general sufferings and the specific sufferings. And the reason for that is, it is said that so long as we don't contemplate on the suffering within samsara, one will never generate the intention to seek liberation. So that is why, we dwell on the suffering of beings within samsara to be able to give rise to that thought of seeking liberation from samsara. But then, right after that, what we do is that after contemplation on suffering, then one is taught to contemplate on the cause of suffering within samsara. Because the cause of samsara, the causes of samsara are two: karma and negative emotions or klesha. And so, if we don't contemplate on the causes of samsara, then we will not be able to understand how to eliminate the root of samsara. Because without actually dwelling or contemplating on the cause of samsara, we won't understand what is the root cause of samsara. So therefore, one is taught to then contemplate on the causes of samsara to be able to understand what is the root of samsara, so that we can actually eliminate the root. So in terms of contemplating or meditating on the causes of samsara, then one is introduced to karma and negative emotions, and how they cause suffering and samsara, and how karma in turn is actually caused by negative emotions. And of all the negative emotions, the root is fundamentally 6 types of emotions, what we call as 6 root kleshas, so 6 root negative emotions. And 20 subsidiary emotions are taught. And then finally, of the 6 types of root emotions, the root of the root is ignorance itself, the primordial ignorance. So then we come to understand that it is the primordial ignorance which is the foundation, or which is the very root of cause of samsara. And then understanding that, then one is taught how to eliminate the root of samsara to be able to give rise to the thought of liberation, and how liberation is possible, and so forth.
어디 있어? 근데 대시 대시네 대시군에 대시 내주 삼백군에 더 거래 단두글로 제했다 단대들이 동해제 삼백도 삼백제 이 동해다 군주네 내주 삼네 거래 단두글로 제제 네 대리야라 중이 군에 네 거래 대신에 조금 말하는 코알레 타도 타야게 탑시다. 근데 얘가 좀 롱주다 루도 공부할 때네. 네 코알레 타주 당이요. 이단데디 동이게 삼바세야 디도 대님이 말씀을 그래서 대님이 대님이 맞으나 도대님의 삼람밤배나 아니 타바주니 지심이 제세야 됐다던데디 군주 그래 주는 마시나 마시나 그래 자와지 주주 미심 했어야지 다 땡신의 주고 보냈어야 돼 타바주니 그거 기주지제 다 땡제 야라 중이 거네 타바 두주디 대체 니아리스 타바 로즈.
So generally speaking, in terms of inducing renunciation, and in terms of giving rise to the thought of seeking liberation, and then the methods of actualizing liberation, there are 2 systems. There are 2 techniques, related techniques. One is the Four Noble Truths. Within the context of Four Noble Truths, one is taught how to give rise to renunciation, one is taught how to give rise to seek liberation, and then one is taught how to actually achieve liberation. The other system is what we discussed before, with respect to the sufferings within samsara, the 6 types of suffering, the 8 types of suffering, the 3 types of suffering, so forth. That is within the context of the Four Noble Truths. The other system is by understanding the 12 links of dependent origination. So by understanding the 12 links of dependent origination in its actual order, and then in its reverse order, by teaching that, one is introduced to the understanding of how one gets propelled within samsara, and what is the way out of it. And so the way out of that, the techniques of liberation, that is taught by actually teaching the 12 links of dependent origination in its reverse order. So there are 2 such systems of giving rise to the thought of liberation and the actual techniques of achieving the state of liberation.
lam kunji ta tanda siva kolu changaba seti changaba tinale tendi ya tabu tile tendi ya la juni ya ni tenshine juti sive karasure siva kolu changaba tinale tenshine juta tendi ya la juni ni ga shiro yasa quality to new to the dually sharing civil crusade. Tinga.
So the 2 systems or 2 techniques of achieving liberation, the Four Noble Truths and the 12 links of dependent origination, both of them are depicted in what is now called the Wheel of Life. So if you look at the Wheel of Life, the Wheel of Existence, Bhavana, you find that there are 5 sections, and each of the sections depict the sufferings to different specific realms and so forth. And they're also like the 12 links are also there. So the Wheel of Life actually teaches both of these 2 techniques or 2 systems, the 12 links of dependent origination as well as the Four Noble Truths.
Oh, that did civil kolu changaba seti changaba seti dire did 감성부터 메타가 천대 지다 신지 송이 집에 시베 콜로 공부사 지나 림바순 다 지나 림바순 이제 림바 바발라 남기네 진짜 창을 제와스 람규나 세티 이들이 람규나 세티 균에 도와서 시도가 균에 도와서 세티 균에 도와서 네 녀 Duelams, Yawati Duelams, Ida Gobelams, Dundrume Belams, Mitambelams, Hamayin, Ta Yemelamdi, Lamgunas, Dal Gunas at the Dingle, Ganje, Nyawaje, Idaje, Dundruje, Nije, Haje, Dingadilla.
How many in the
Hamayin Yamade, Hamayin Duga, Ruari Drusina, Alhamati Duga, Ruari Druga, Nam Sina, Nasi Lam Gunaset, that the silver quality Dante.
So within the in this wheel of life, there are 3 circles, and in the middle circle, it is divided into 5 sections, and those 5 sections respectively depict the 5 realms that of hell realm, realm of hungry gods, realm of animals, realm of human beings, and then realm of gods. So therefore, these 5 sections in the wheel of life, therefore, introduces the sufferings of what we call as 5 transmigrators, and what is actually missing is the demigods. So therefore, in these 5 sections, then one is basically introduced to these sufferings of samsara, in particular sufferings of each of the 5 realms.
That did it, the Changaba did it, Gogandu, Changaba Chaus, then do had the Minam Sos, Linishibuta, Gus, Jitike, Simje, Sujin, Chumushindu, Chibua, the Joa, Dajabus, that then do had a meat, had a meat, Linshi had a meat, not mean ridiculous, had in use of the Ja, Shedan, the Timu, Humurus, that use of the Jada Shedangi, Kasuri, Timusum, Purunda, Tuida, Paginabas, Timoti, Purinche, Druidi, Shedan, Party, or its party Timuche, Water, Purun, Paginabas, Nama Tini, Timu, Saves, Timu the Saves, the Timu the Paraba, Pagi Kainadu, Takanje, Kidele, Iva Paje, Jadit, Juiche, Tiati, Chiche, Changavane, Chiche. Tendo Sange Yanele de Kingur Gabus. Oh, Kolkoyudu, Tendi Yala Juni, Tamje, Yordembaz, Tamje, Medabeni, Swans. Ya, Tendo, Tendo, Tendi Yala Juni, the Tendo, Sange Yanele de Kingo Gabu. Oh, to Zamba Janshi. She did oh, the letter, Zamba Jash, no, Jash, but she did it. Did ever chive Shavos Changa with Timin.
Channel the Gyunga the worms.
Yeah,
Gyunga the Maro.
my Junior did the Juna said it. Chinasum de Lam Gyung and Ruat Changing Changar Cheres, Shinji Yala Shi, Simbusoy, Kuluti, Dambe Chuki, US. The Ganje Changa de Tengle Yudiva had a miniche. What a Nesosumiva. Nesosum did it. Had a mean with the technical. 때 뒤지가 녀석순디가 다지네 야 기들라 대자시다 좀 수부지 타고르들라 된대야가 좀 다 된대야 중에 되들라 상계 구치도 봐 되게 장난을 참아서 되게 된대야라도 대신에 중이가 된시도 봐
So it actually, what it said was the wheel of life with 5 parts or 5 sections depict both the 12 links of dependent origination as well as the Four Noble Truths as 2 systems of achieving liberation. So these 5 parts or 5 sections are, if you can visualize the wheel of life, what you have is, first of all, in the center there is a picture of a pig, a bird, and a snake, and symbolizing the 3 root negative emotions, and the so that is one part or one section. And then in the next circle, then you have on the top. You have a big one.
심제 수준 정무신도 치보와도 개와다고 의수대자 한딘 의수대자의 시다 띵무슨 그런 주의 파고 파게나 뭐 아마 띵이 띵도 어디지 지지 그렇고요도 된데 야라 중이 탐제 미다바니 기송하고 이제 땡도 상계 양해는데베 띵고 가고 여러 점 봐. 어도 잠벌 창시 집에 직제 니 저때 제가 샤워 샤버 자우 시에서부터 이제는 장가버서 띵 야, 다 장가버디 어디 계신
그들면서
어디 해서 되겠다.
기운나도 소신.
기운나지 되지.
So the 5 migrators or 5 mediums, which basically depicts the 5 types of transmigratory beings, excluding the realm of demigods. These are actually depicted here. In the top, these like human and gods. Then in the below, there is hell and realm of animals, and then hungry ghosts. So these 5 sections basically depict the suffering of samsara, which then is related to the Four Noble Truths. And then in the exterior circle, you have the 12 links of dependent origination, which is the other system, which is the 12 links of dependent origination.
On the outer circle.
Yeah, outer circle.
지나 림버 순지 림버 바르발라스 누가 람킹에 좋아 츠이치
어디 있어?
장나를 제바스
다 참마다. So the 5 sections or 5 parts are basically these 5 transmigratories that are actually depicted in the middle circle. In the inner circle, then you have the pig and the bird and the snake, symbolizing the 3 root negative emotions: desire, ignorance, and hatred. And both of them, the bird and the snake coming out from the pig's mouth, basically symbolizes that the root of both desire and hatred in turn is actually ignorance. So ignorance is the root of all the emotions.
디엔사한테 감수는 탐지 메답에 메답아 인바 천지도 지다신지 수니지 다 지다신지도 수니지야 디 감수는 강걸로 지와 메답에 아니 그래서 메답에가 신이가 천연지도 지다신지
So then you have also the picture of the Lord of Death actually holding the wheel of life, and that is to symbolize that everything within the three realms of samsara are impermanent and subject to death. So impermanence and death is symbolized by the Lord of Death holding the wheel of life.
디에서 되게 된지야라 되게 denshida denji yana jungni gi denshi lam zoba denbiyas ni denji yana jungni ya denduga denbayas di sa di gecho de sine ne jungde de rangi ni zola kan ni gongjo ji shu sunduga denshi lam to chindi malu ba nyamsu ni ju di ge sungi ji jenju gecho ba yinla 야와라 니기 잔티가 개체로 보내 nende제디 공미지 되잖남라 출신도 덤버제네 제주남라 디신도 또 가신 또나 되쳐를 공내 둘라칸 고간도 대신랑도 탐제 차장을 덤베 시베콜로 창나바지니 시야가 된거를 도와는 것입니다.
So therefore, the wheel of life is actually regarded as very powerful and significant in terms of depicting these both two systems of liberation, that is 12 links of Tibetan origination as well as the Four Noble Truths. And the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha himself during his own lifetime used the wheel of life to teach the 12 links of Tibetan origination and the Four Noble Truths. And he also taught in the Vinaya that his disciples in the future should actually draw the paintings of the wheel of life and then hang it on the at the door of the monastery or on the walls of the monastery, because of its relevance and because of its significance in terms of teaching this fundamental Buddhist structure of liberation and structure of how one gets propelled within samsara and what is really the way out of it.
Yeah, that is just devious.
Sarvaji said, now I've shown you the path right there. So we're going to stop here, but before we stop, maybe we can take one or two questions.
Earlier this morning, we touched upon the Bardo state and using the 3 jewels of refuge to protect ourselves from the terrible fights. And can he elaborate more on the frights? Because sometimes it's taught in Dissolution of Death that you swoon before clear light, and like if you're so frightened and terrified, it'd be very hard to remember the 3 jewels and emptiness and good thoughts. So how does one go through these perilous trials?
다시 가서 이 잡두기 태수가 뭐야? 딱 버드기 직접 숨 되는 숨인가? 네 아니 다시 지금 다시 빈데 거야 직접 되는 거야? 다 좀 많이 느껴서 줘 보이나? 이게 아니 테니 잡그리 숨으로 다디 아니 딱그 뭐 고름 초에나 저어디 그 딱 가지 들으셔디 먼저 야 남기다 지림 기갑라야 아니 월세 뭐 초에 되게 지금 아야 벌베 겁라 지라 된대요나 안 지라 된대 가네 요새 가르쳐 못 추그랬어
parto chile tiene yo sigue tiene parto shagres yo sigue lungdios tiene parto duyares sembra con
so actually the clear light stage is a stage prior to Bado. That is the it's during the dissolution process that culminates in clear light, and clear light is this state just prior to Bado state. And clear light is a state where there's no movement of the subtlest wind, so therefore it's developing into a state of utter clarity where there is no thought, which is a kind of a more gross or coarser mind. So the subtlest mind, the clear light, has no such thought, and fear and so forth, they are actually forms of thoughts. So therefore clear light practice is done prior to going into Bado state. But when the wind moves even very subtly from the state of clear light, that is the same time when it actually gets into the Bado state. So when in Bado state, then the wind goes through a reverse stage, and therefore the concepts they become grosser and grosser, and then that's when you have these terrible kind of fear and so forth.
Yeah. But then if you just keep on practice thinking non-conceptually, non-dual, non-conception, trying to maneuver through that, going to grosser and grosser, coarser states of mind? Or do you try to prevent any coarse state of mind?
Can you?
Yeah, by staying as long as possible in clear light.
아니 딱 월세기 곰디 gyunediga 부담 주는 거 좋아해 되는 식으로 이디다 이 생기 월세기 모토데 디나리아 디기나다 지금 넘버 샵체다 롱도 뭐예지 근데 다 다른 거라서 부담 너무 쉬우게 되고요 다도 날 두고 말아 근데 답람도디 월세가도 진짜지도 샵도 있나 안 부담스 되는 셔오를 근데
现在就这样，干工会，这几年为新来的不定的，东北你的没为新来的不定的土地的，你有人不，今年的家土地，这我的意思。
Yes, so that's exactly what's happening is when if somebody has achieved single-pointed, non-dualistic concentration on emptiness, then that's the time you blend that meditation with your clear light meditation, because it becomes much easier, because clear light itself is such that there is no concept. And so therefore, someone who has trained in this life can prolong that state. So people remain in that clear light state for many days. So somebody who is trained can do that, prolong that.
It seems like in this text or in this teaching, we don't talk very much about compassion, and it's very much on the wisdom side. And I'm just wondering where our practice of compassion comes in to this particular practice.
And the 대람긴 나라야 단답도 닝지당 정줍심들을 걸 그런 거 소스 다디 그리고 탕그르스
다디 달 생이 페이지 탕그르스 되게 진 조사를
닝지 곧
다디는 인지다 지금 친구 거든 그래서 제주
So that will come within the context of circle of teachings belonging to the person of great scope. Right now we are dealing with the person of little scope and small scope, and when it comes to the teachings belonging to the person of great scope, then there's a lot of emphasis on compassion and bodhicitta.
Jere se won tenzin gyatso yi, shabbe sike